Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Deku Broke His Physical Limiter Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
When Midoriya opens his eyes, he sees a city in ruins. He was floating in midair with a prosthetic limb and a big breathing device covering his head, while the rest of the environment around him was reduced to rubble. A best jeanist was covered in blood on the floor. In order to determine whether anyone was still buried beneath the debris, Midoriya employed quirk sight. He wrapped a couple civilians in Ua after seeing them down underneath. He noticed Momo, Kaminari, Kirishima, and Tenya cowering behind a half-demolished wall. "Ah, Midoriya, fancy meeting you here. How was your time at the lab?" "Could have been better. Tamura, I'm afraid that this is how we part ways. I have so much more to teach you, but the situation demands that I fight to ensure your freedom." "But Sensei." All for one. An air cannon rejected All Might's dive kick as it came crashing down from the sky. "I believe it's time for your grand exit, Tamura. So long as you are free, the League will never fall." The warping quirk that All for One tries to use on Tamura and his crew doesn't activate. In fact, he doesn't feel it. Suddenly, a translucent green liquid that resembled slime engulfed Tamura, driving them away. Warping taken. Radio waves captured. Search conducted. Quirk synergy. Quirk progenitor weakness detection, quirk sight, and search. Let's see how that goes. A timer displayed over his head as Izuku turned on All Might's vulnerability detection. Quirk time remaining, 10:36. He is approaching his limit. When Midoriya turned to face All for One, a green glow encircled his entire body, and a small box with the word "weak" inscribed on it and an arrow pointing at All for One was visible to the side. There were some snickers coming from the crowd. When the shape of Tamura and his group vanishes, All for One realizes something. "He possesses my peculiarity, he possesses my quirk." Midoriya blocks All for One's blow with his palm as he tries to strike him with his prosthetic arm. "Give them back." His face mask gets dented when All Might clocks him in the chin. Holding his mask, All for One stumbles back. Not very heroic of the number one to attack someone unguarded. You've never been to one to give such courtesy. All for One attempts to blast All Might away with air cannons, but All Might evaporates any he fires. "You will not hurt a single soul here. Oh, I wouldn't count on that, All Might." A mom and child were in an opening beneath the debris when a structure started to shift and was on the verge of collapsing. For starters, he lifted his arm, which started to swell and swell. The engorged flesh sprouted spikes and scrap metal. "How do you like it? A special combination I cooked up for a special occasion." In front of the civilians stood All Might. "I will not let you harm anyone else." "Oh, All Might, always the one to sacrifice themselves, but you know you can't save everyone. You couldn't even save your master's grandson." "Tenko Shimura. You will pay for what you did." The fact that All Might knew astonished All for One, but whatever. He lifted his deformed arm, pulled it back, and sent All Might a shockwave. When a green warp gate opened in the root of his fist, the blow returned to All Might's mask, destroying it and preventing the outcome of the attack from happening. A little trickle of blood escapes his mouth as All for One is hurled into the debris. The civilians tumble into a green gateway as All Might turns to face them. "All that power, yet you still make the same mistakes." As All for One frowns and pushes himself up, Midoriya rips the anti-quirk cuff off his neck and rushes him, his arm still swollen. Although Midoriya deflects the strike, it rips the flesh off his arm, exposing his skeleton and muscles. All for One was shocked when Midoriya's arm was fully healed by his several regeneration quirks because his own did not function so quickly. "What? How?" The good doctor was a great tour guide. All for One rushes Midoriya once more in an attempt to grab him, but a dark beam fired from the several arms that emerge from Midoriya's back blasts him back. One tries to dodge the beams by running around, but several of them curve and fall straight onto his chest. You really should have been smarter when choosing which quirks to take. After all, quirks are full of surprises. While his master's killer was being played with like a cat with its meal, All Might watched. Astonished by what he sees, Gran Torino lands directly beside All Might. Seeing the monster who killed his friend make a valiant attempt to defend himself against an unbeatable force was euphoric. Why the kidnapped child was fighting the evil alone baffled the other heroes who had just arrived. Endeavor stomped furiously in the direction of All Might. "What the hell are you doing letting the victim deal with the villain you're supposed to defeat? I believe that young Midoriya has it handled." "The hell he does." Endeavor lunges at All for One to strike him, but All for One swiftly bats him away as he tries to deflect the beams. That hot-headed idiot. When Gran Torino descended to retrieve Endeavor, All for One noticed and launched an air cannon in his direction, but a gateway in the sky diverted it, dispelling the clouds. All for One clenched his jaw in rage. He hates not knowing every piece of the puzzle and not having control. He made the decision to let go and eliminate this threat with everything he had. By combining his strongest eccentricities, he was able to change his body into a creature devoid of human characteristics. With a fierce snarl, it charges towards Midoriya, tearing up the pavement beneath him. When the heroes saw this, they hurried to assist, but each person who stood in their path was knocked aside. The quirk strands shattered from the pulling on All for One, and even All Might behind the beast was unable to restrain it with Black Whip. Fearing a child's death on live national television, the world watched as the beast passed over Midoriya. Pulling his arm back, Midoriya gathers all the quirks and adaptations that would empower his blow. One for All, Dark Cowl, Crush, Air Cannon, Spring-like Limbs, Body Bulk, Expand, Hypertrophy X5, Kinetic Booster, Muscle Augmentation X6, Speed Enhancer X75, Power, Velocity Manipulation, and Kinetic Stockpile. A strong limb wrapped in metal, arcs of green and black lightning, and an energy-constructed jet of flame propelling the arm forward give him a monstrous appearance. He was not finished when he punched All for One, blowing away his new form and leaving Viscera on the ground. The bomb that passed All for One was blocked by a warp gate, which sent it straight back to him. The punch's whole amount of kinetic energy was diverted from every direction into All for One. The heroes on the ground marveled at the spectacle. When the dust settled, a damaged and bleeding All for One was discovered buried beneath the debris. Midoriya approached him while glancing down at his nude body. He had numerous scars from the battle with All Might. The rest of his body appeared to be pulled by the grafted skin. A hole in his neck where his Mosk's pipping used to be. Good job, hero. Did it feel good to destroy all that I had prepared for the last 2 centuries? My defeat here means nothing. With me gone, the others will fight to take my territory. This fight was meaningless. Villainy will always persist for what is light without darkness. Then I will push them back to the depths they came from. They will fear the mere thought of acting in the light, believing that it will draw me to them. This is it then. Well, what are you heroes waiting for? Arrest me. Izuku rubs his head while kneeling. Both of them enter Izuku's quirk realm as a result of the interaction. The sight of a grassy field with a lone tree on a little hill awakens his eyes for the first time in 5 years. Using both hands, he feels the soft skin of his head. His short white hair floated in a light breeze. How? It's been a while since you've been here, All for One. He turns to see Midoriya standing behind him, but a force field stops his arm just as he is about to punch him. A lot has changed since you were last here, especially after I got One for All. You're All Might's successor, the 9th holder, and the last to hold One for All. Turning around, All for One sees the former One for All bearers. His sibling was the most significant. Yoichi. Yes, that is me, Mugen. However, as you passed away, I held you. Quirks are full of surprises, as Midoriya had previously stated. Storing up power. It has a rather unusual name. The longer the quirk is held, the more power the user gains. It would have been merely a simple power accumulator if it hadn't been melded with transfer. The powers of the stockpile had increased by becoming One for All. A relic of the previous users was preserved by the quirk, permitting a particular form of use to continue after the original has died. Mugen ponders the facts for a moment. Why haven't you taken control of the other users, then? You ought to be aware of my objectives to live a longer life. Because One for All wasn't fully developed yet. Contact with 9th was the only thing that altered us. Us? The final remnant appears as a burning silhouette of All Might, and behind Yoichi the other holders of One for All appeared one by one, Mugen growing increasingly irritated with each one. One for All achieved singularity with Midoriya's assistance. We were able to observe the outside world by allowing our mind to remain in the quirk. Additionally, it allowed us to pass on our peculiarities to the most recent heir. After assuming that he had been handed the peculiarities after losing them to the brat, Mugen's eyes widened as he finally received a tangible explanation for how All Might had been able to employ the previous holder's quirk. The boy will be the last, but why? One for All is now too strong for anyone to maintain. Remember when you found him on the 4th? Not precisely. I recall being upset that they had passed away before I could reach them. Before the bald one emerged, I believed One for All had vanished forever. My physical condition was rapidly declining. I was only able to conceal the oddity for 18 years in the hopes of finding a replacement. The person who attempted to save me came in fifth. Midoriya's peculiarity enables him to adjust to the decline, ensuring that he won't be impacted by the disadvantages and that, given the number of oddities he now possesses, the 10th won't have enough time to adjust. I didn't want you to follow a tyrant's path, brother. I couldn't persuade you otherwise because I was too weak. Now, however, things are different. Even though I believe Midoriya was more than prepared to defeat you himself, my quirk has finally become powerful enough to defeat you. The Vestiges had never seen All for One so solemn, a broken man with his plans laid to ruin around him, but he couldn't just leave it like this. He tried to walk toward Midoriya, but his body froze as a text box appeared in front of him. All for One is silently staring into space. Give up. Y.N. He was taken aback by this and looked up at the group, who were all frozen except for Midoriya, who approached him and waited for him to make a decision that would apparently determine his future. N. Even in self-defense, you will not be allowed to use any quirk or act maliciously against others. Are you certain? Y.N. Nothing he could think of could save him from this, and he didn't want to chance lying to whatever this quirk was, so he was afraid now, something he hadn't felt since he had battled All Might. N. Taking away the instinct for retribution. Mugen's eyes turned bloodshot, tears of blood signaling his misery and sorrow, and his head pounded in agony, like red-hot needles dragging themselves all over his skull. He tried to scream, but no sound came out as he clawed at his head, leaving deep scratch scars that were soon healed. Taking away the instinct for self-preservation. He had lived a long and eventful life trying to keep his empire together, and the pain came back with a vengeance. The ordeal lasted a few minutes, and Mugen saw bits and pieces of his life flash by quickly, but he didn't have time to think about them because his mind was permanently altered. He fell to his knees, his arms at his sides, and his hands lying limp on the ground. Gradually, his eyes regained their clarity as he stood up and time passed again. You won't witness my demise. The fact that his brother was still as obstinate as ever saddened Yuichi. Well, I suppose that is resolved. Let's leave this place. Returning to reality, Midoriya absorbs the remaining idiosyncrasies of All for One, leaving just life energy, infrared, and super regeneration. Taken for one. Taken from rivet stab, taken from hypertrophy. Activation of forced quirk taken, change of blood. Air cannon removed, taken from spring-like limbs. Taken during an airwalk, taken by impact recoil. Infrared captured, taken from spear-like bones. Armor taken from scrap, bolt-up captured. I took a pain blocker, taken from gigantification. Taken with strength enhancer X5, taken with speed enhancer X5. Taken with shock absorption. The heroes approached All for One's barely conscious body. Sleep. After All for One passes out and is carried away by the police, the news helicopters landed close by and rushed up to interview All Might, who Midoriya inspected for signs of weakness. Quirk time remaining. 0:28. All Might turns to face Midoriya, who ran up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. You're running out of time. The eyes of All Might enlarge. All right, I think that answers all of your questions for now. I'll have to get Midoriya examined. All Might was restrained when he attempted to take off with Midoriya. All Might. Smoke billowed from his body, hiding it from the cameras, and All Might moaned in fear as he gazed at him. The world watched in disbelief until the smoke cleared, showing a little, gaunt man with deeply sunken cheeks and eyes. I am here to tell you the truth. The world was shocked to learn of All Might's health, and since his time was running out, they wanted to know how he had become so ill. This was done by the villain who was just vanquished. I held a conference all those years ago. Do you still recall it? That was the first time I had ever seen him. Does this imply that you will no longer be the top player? Just a drop in activity. No, though it has been becoming shorter and shorter, I still have enough time to continue. In addition, I think there are other heroes who are prepared to replace me. Is that why you permitted the absent pupil to engage in combat with the antagonist? A portion of it. I personally battled the boy for his test. He was more than prepared to take on a foe of that kind. The reporter hands Midoriya the microphone. Any thoughts on that? I'm happy the number one trusts me to clean up his mess. As if you couldn't have completed the battle sooner, you requested that I show you this form. Disclosing it would be preferable. In this manner, it ignites a fire beneath the other heroes. Supported by the emblem of peace, they have been a little too at ease. It's time for them to take charge. I assume you disagree that All Might should be the sole hero at the top, Midoriya. Could you give further details? I mean, think about it. The peace of Japan has been held and maintained by a single man. A mortal man. We've all been relying on him to keep our streets safe and peaceful. When he finally steps down, crime will skyrocket. Without someone to stop them, they will be emboldened to act in the light. No man rules alone, and everyone must do their part to keep the peace. Midoriya was transported to the ambulance to be examined for injuries following the spontaneous interview. They give him a clean bill of health and let him go after finding nothing unusual. Midoriya used search right away to find the pussycats. When he discovered them close by, he knocked and entered Ragdoll's chamber. Midoriya. What are you doing here? Beside Ragdoll's bed, Midoriya strolls. Just here to return something. To surprise the other pussycats, Midoriya initially gave her super regeneration to restore her health and gave her quirk back. Search provided. When her quirk reappeared, Ragdoll looked about in surprise. How? I took it back from him, then. It's the same quirk as his. My quirk took his original quirk, which can take and give quirks. At the end where I was touching him, I took the quirks he had and left behind a few that kept him alive. Ragdoll sprung off her bed and gave Izuku a hug. She thanked him for restoring her quirk. For a group embrace, the other pussycats join in. The days that followed were a little strange. On the street, a lot more people recognized him and asked to take his photo and sign his autograph. He was even shown on store shelves as products. The fight's video had been making the rounds online, and people were analyzing it. Many have seen Midoriya's usage of several peculiarities. The portals that redirected the last strike back into the villain were the most noticeable. Before someone made an astounding suggestion, many news stations had brought in experts to analyze the fight and determine the true origin of Midoriya's quirk. However, many of their hypotheses were contradictory. He must be able to copy or unbelievably take quirks. That's why his quirk was similar to the villain's. In the video, the villain could be seen teleporting people in with a dark sludge-like substance, and Midoriya was able to do the same, albeit with a different color. The giant portal used in the final blow was not used by the villain, so I could be from another person. The discovery sparked a new round of conjecture on the origins of the peculiarities. Whether he could take eccentricities was one intriguing question. Was that why he spent such an odd amount of time in contact with the villain? What peculiarity might he have inherited from him? Adding to that, may the antagonist accept quirks? Before long, details about the villain had come to light. Because of his ability to give and receive oddities, he was known by the moniker All for One. It was assumed that he was born around the dawn of quirks, yet his exact age was unknown. Many historians were intrigued by this and wanted to talk to him to learn about life before the emergence of peculiarities, but the prison where he was being held did not allow visitors. Many people's views were validated by this revelation, yet it came with no hard evidence or admission. Only conjecture existed. After being teleported to Ua, Tenko and his team were permitted to remain on Ua property while wearing anti-quirk handcuffs. To make up for lost time and to keep an eye on Tenko, Nana had split from Izuku. Nezu did some favors to keep them in Ua when the HPSC tried to lock them up like All for One. In relation to the HPSC, they had continued to watch Midoriya. Despite having spies close by wherever he was, they never ventured near Ua. Although they haven't attempted to get in touch with Midoriya personally, that might soon change. When Ua had resumed its operation, it comes out that following the kidnapping, Nezu had obtained authorization to put in place the dorm system he desired. Entering the lounge through the main door of the new dorm building, Midoriya discovers the rooms they were given on the back of the door. Midoriya's room was reserved in an envelope, and thanks to Nezu's kindness and generosity, it was situated beneath the bottom floor, occupying the entire structure. The other person's room appeared to be 10 times smaller than his. "You want the whole class to despise me, damn you, Nezu. You're my student, you can handle this much," was written on the back of his room's floor plan. He lets out a sigh and descends inside his new home via the elevator. When he descends, he sees a single reinforced door with a randomizer keypad and a note on it. He says, "Press both top corners of the door frame with black whip." As he did, 2 tiny pinholes appeared, and when he pressed them, a small panel on the wall flipped over, giving him a green metallic bracelet and another letter. It described the door security measures as he opened it. "Oh, and Melissa left a little gift when she saw that your costume breaks routinely during every fight." Midoriya switched it on and put on the bracelet. It grew larger and encircled his body, resembling his former superhero outfit. His torso was encircled by a web of dark, metallic green bars. Only after exerting a great deal of energy was he able to dent the portion of the suit that was on his arm. The bands of the garment pulled tautly, and the raised dent was soon repaired. Satisfied with the outcome, he unlocks the door using today's code, which coincidentally is, "Hope you enjoy your stay." A giant TV and a remote control on the coffee table greet him as he enters the spacious room. A dining table and kitchen were located behind the couch on the left. A lengthy hallway that led to his bedroom, a bathroom, a laundry area, and a gym, quirk testing room was located just opposite from him. Entering his bedroom, which was tastefully decorated, a state-of-the-art supercomputer built with peculiarities was on exhibit in the room, which was quite modest for Nezu. Unexpectedly, aside from the quirk-reinforced gym, Midoriya found the remainder of his new living space to be very regular. When Midoriya returned to the lounge, she noticed that everyone was present. "Hey Midoriya. Didn't know you were already here. Where is your room? We couldn't find it on the list." "I'm in the basement. I think Nezu overcompensated after the kidnapping." "Cool, can we come visit?" "Hey, you can't just barge into someone's room like that. You know what, how about we have a little competition? We go into everyone's rooms and vote on the best room in the dorm. You losers have fun with that, I'm going to bed." Kirishima attempted to rise up and grab Bakugo as he left, but Midoriya stopped her. "Don't bother, he's really strict about his bedtime." "Alright, no Bakugo, let's go check everyone's rooms out." The lesson began on the boys' side of the top floor after deciding to leave Midoriya's room for last. Each person's psyche was revealed through the rooms. The candies that Sato made were very well liked by the females. They entered the elevator and proceeded to the basement, where they noticed the security door. Geez, you weren't kidding about Nezu overcompensating. As they entered, they discovered that Midoriya had the entire flat to himself. Kirishima even wanted to utilize a private gym for a while. They returned to the lounge after inspecting the establishment to declare Sato the winner, who received 5 votes. The guys strongly disputed their claim that the food had bribed them. Everyone excused themselves and went to bed because it was becoming rather late. The following morning, Midoriya got up early and went about his normal business. He headed to his gym to test out the peculiarities he had acquired during the entire kidnapping process because morning courses were about to begin. He felt a bubbling sensation beneath his skin when the first one ruptured. He drove the sensation into his finger, focusing on it, forcing it to burst into viscera and dent a practice dummy. Then he cloned himself and tried double. As it turned out, the clone was just a perfect replica of him, complete with peculiarities. He attempted to extract the clone's eccentricities, but nothing emerged. The clone turned when he snapped its finger. He was unable to test out the forced quirk activation because he had no one to test it on, but this continued for the remainder of the morning. Many of the quirks were solely for battle. In the afternoon, together with Aizawa, Midnight, Cementos, and Ectoplasm, the class assembled in the gym Gamma. They were informed that the training camp's first objective was to assist the class in getting ready for their provisional licenses. They were given 10 days to come up with their best movements because they would be crucial to passing the test. "But sir, doesn't Midoriya already have one with the portals?" Midoriya picks up a rock and tosses it into the air to emphasize their point. He flicks at it, then reroutes the excess force back toward it using his portal. The rock was transformed into a fine dust mist and blew away after the energy ran out. While that is an ultimate move, it doesn't hurt to create new ones. Anyway, since you have one Midoriya, did you think of a name for it? "I was thinking of calling it Wasteless. I'm not exactly in love with the name, but it's the best I've got." "Then what about the 4 extra arms you grew?" "Still working on that. I was thinking of calling that Inherited Wrath, though just having 6 arms doesn't live up to the name." "Alright everyone, let's get to it." Each student spent the remainder of the class learning new movements or honing their quirk control. In the middle of the lesson, All Might had arrived to assist with supervision and observe the other teachers' methods. Midoriya had been wondering about what goes on in the development studio after training because he had been hearing explosions whenever he passed by and because Uraraka and Tenya were heading there to upgrade their costumes. Midoriya prevented Uraraka and Tenya from approaching the door because a preemptive warning went off as they approached. The metal door to the room flies off when a powerful explosion occurs. Using telekinesis, Midoriya grabbed the door and grabbed the guy flying with it by the collar. Increased potency. Headache resistance. Thanks for the save, Greenie. He apprehended a short, mature-looking girl with thick dreadlocks of pink hair. She was dressed in coveralls fastened around her waist, a black tank top, and some strange goggles. Powerloader left the studio, glaring at the girl with the pink hair. "Hatsume, I swear to God, if you make another thing that explodes, I'm revoking your rights to the support studio." "But how would I know if I was doing it right if it doesn't blow up once or twice? Besides, you would have thrown me out if you could." Turning, Powerloader faced Midoriya and his team. "Well, I guess you're here with some changes, come on in. They entered the studio together. There were numerous incomplete projects scattered about the work tables in the spacious, disorganized workplace. There was a massive stack of inventions in the corner. So what needs changing? I'm looking to make the cooling on my calves better. And I want something to get rid of my headache. Then what about Midoriya? Oh, I just came 'cause I heard the explosions and wanted to check the place out. Hatsume had been examining the green wristband on Midoriya's wrist while they were conversing. Hey, Greenie, where did someone like you get that? A friend gave it to me, can I touch it? She was lifting his hand up to better view the wristband before he could reply. She kept nudging it to do something, but she was growing increasingly irritated that nothing was happening. When Midoriya saw this, he pressed the button, causing the bracelet to enlarge and around his body. Hatsune observed the change with delight and wonder. She started feeling up the outfit when that was over. She turns to face Midoriya again. You have to let me meet your friend. Better yet, we're friends now. Anything you need, just give me a call and only me. With a pacifying smile, Midoriya nodded slowly and turned to face Powerloader, who had his head in his hands. Her name is Mei Hatsume. She's in the support course and hasn't left the development studio since she's got here, but some of her inventions have potential. Senezu likes her. Hatsume, we also needed some improvements to our costumes. She turns to face Iida, and Uraraka gives them a startled glance. Oh, Engine Boy and Bob Cut, when did you get here? Hearing that, the two of them nearly collapse. I want a better cooling system for my engines, and Uraraka needed a way to get rid of her headaches. Then why didn't you say that sooner? Come on, I have so many babies to show you. Hatsume showed them a lot of her alleged children. Some of them were quite intriguing, but since they were prototypes, many of them may blow up at any time. After being informed that the babies would be manufactured in due haste, the three departed the development studio. Days go by as the Provisional Hero License exam date approaches. When they reached the National Dagoba Arena, the students disembarked from the bus. Aizawa assured them that passing the test would make them semi-professionals and mark the beginning of their hero status. Kirishima shouted out as she got excited. In addition to Ultra, one of his students calls up, and a big student, dressed in the black slacks, white button-up shirt, and school hat of Shiketsu High School, butts into the chant with an eager expression on his face. Yorashi, you shouldn't barge into people's chant like that. Yorashi loudly apologizes as he turns to face Class 1A. I am so. He bowed and pounded his head into the pavement, cracking it, to express his guilt. I apologize. Seeing UA's future heroes is just fantastic. Saying the school chant has always been a goal of mine. That is Inasa Yorashi. He was one of the recommended students who had passed their exam but decided to not join UA. Aizawa was abruptly embraced from behind by a woman with green hair, orange gloves, and a bandana while the class wondered why he had departed. Did you miss me, Shota? Leave me alone. This is Size. M's happy to meet you. Joke. I learned a lot about you from Eraserhead. He should have kicked out some of you by now, but because you're still here, he must have liked you. Behind her, a crowd of kids in brown pants and gray shirts gathered. Oh, this is my class from Ketsubutsu High. Hello, this is Tatami Nakagame. He's Yo Shindo, nice to meet you all. With a smile that stopped short of his eyes, Shindo introduced himself. Bakugo, Todoroki, and Midoriya noticed this. Bakugo came up to him. Your eyes don't line up with your smile, and you're as ferocious as they say. Get ready for the exam. Ms. Joke observes that Aizawa has neglected to provide a crucial piece of information regarding these examinations with his class as he leads them into the arena. The class was assembled in a spacious, rectangular room. There was a podium in front of it with a weary-looking man in a suit with beige hair. As the pupils assembled, he yawned. After everyone had assembled, the room's doors were slammed shut, startling the students and waking the weary guy, who then started talking wearily upon realizing that everyone was present. Hello everyone, my name is Yokomiru Mera. I'm a yawn worker from the Hero Public Safety Commission. They have been working us to the bone. We do not have enough people for this, but as they say, the show must go on. Today's test is a free-for-all. With the amount of incidents nowadays, the commission is using this test to filter for speed. Only the first 100 students will pass on to the next round. Everyone will be given 6 red balls and 3 targets which will be placed on the body to represent weak points. If all targets are hit, you are out. Each student needs to eliminate at least 2 students to pass. Only the last hit counts. I wish you all happy hunting. The hall's walls burst open while Mera is speaking, exposing the fact that it was constructed in the center of the arena. With his hero costume on, Midoriya positioned the 3 targets in the middle of his chest. In order to adapt to the changes, he expanded his wings and used Multiply to develop 2 pairs of arms from his back. Todoroki and Bakugo departed right away in search of more pupils. Everyone, we need to stay together. I'll fly up and be lookout. Yoshindo's class was surrounded by Ketsubutsu classmates before Midoriya could get too far. It seems like your teacher didn't tell you. Everyone will be gunning after you. You're UA after all, we need to eliminate the strongest competition. Thanks for the compliment, but I think you underestimate us. It's been a long time since the sports festival. The ground becomes unstable when Shindo puts his hands on it, causing it to tremble and shatter. As the other classes hurled their balls directly at them, the majority of the class was attempting to steady themselves. When Midoriya saw the assault, he held out his hand. Everyone cover your ears. Jiro knew what was coming, so she shut her ears right away. All of the balls were rejected back at their attackers when Midoriya snapped his fingers, sending a shockwave across the air. Izuku Midoriya passes the first part of the exam with 3 eliminations. Please proceed to the waiting room when you are ready. The truth, their assailants were on the ground when Momo looked up. Thanks, Midoriya. I guess we'll see you in the waiting room. What are you talking about? I'm staying to support you guys. I'm just hanging back to make sure all of us make it. What about Bakugo and Todoroki? I'm sure they can handle themselves. The class as a whole went on. In order to look for more groups, Midoriya flew around. It went slowly, but they were eliminated a few times. Concerned that none of them would pass, Momo proposed that they divide up. Which means Midoriya won't be able to support all of us. You guys sure you've got this? We still want to prove ourselves as real heroes, and I think the judges will think you're carrying the class. The truth, fair enough. Show them what you've got. I'll see you guys later. Midoriya shoots away and files up. Completing the course in a manner that they may be proud of, he pulls his additional limbs back as he gets to the waiting area and looks at the other students who passed. Inasa approached him wearing his cozy hero outfit. Hey Midoriya, you're finally here. You're the first one from UA that showed up here. The truth? Really? I would have thought that Bakugo or Todoroki would have made it here first. Midoriya noticed a minor change in Inasa's demeanor when Todoroki was mentioned. I take it you don't like Endeavor, or at least his family. To his amazement, Inasa noticed. Yeah, I was a fan of him once, but after meeting him I just couldn't support a man so cold. Well, they say never to meet your heroes, but don't let that one experience change how you look at them. Did Todoroki remind you of him? He did. When I went to greet him during the recommended exam, he blew me off with the same look his father had. That made me reevaluate going to UA. Well, I can't really blame you for being put off by the Ice Prince's demeanor. He hasn't changed much since you've seen him. Still has the cold gaze he gives everyone. You've seen the sports festival, right? Yeah? Well, during my fight with him, I tried to see why he was so distant. It turns out Endeavor was more of a monster than we realized. Then what they said on the news has some truth to it. I heard it from him, but I can't just take the word of one person. We'll need to hear from the other members of the Todoroki family. Todoroki showed there at that precise moment. As Todoroki moved to a corner of the room and avoided talking to anyone, Inasa watched him closely. He really is still the same. He didn't even come speak to you. Don't hold that against him. He still has time to change. And what if he never does? He'll just become Endeavor number 2. We can make sure he does change or keep him in line if he doesn't. All right. The remainder of the class soon started to arrive. While many of them had some wear and tear, none were worse off. Suddenly, a scream caught their attention. The entire area became a disaster zone when the buildings surrounding the arena abruptly erupted. A few individuals were seen screaming for assistance as they crawled out of the debris. This is your test's second and last section. Your objective, as portrayed by the Help Us company, is to save the civilians from the arena's catastrophe. You will all receive grades based on how well the rescue operations are conducted. It is your responsibility to evaluate the situation and react appropriately. The situation is that first responders are being held up after a terrorist assault. The hero's task is to save as many civilians as they can. The test is about to start. When the pupils heard this, they hurried outside to locate the civilians. Could you make us some communications, Momo? To avoid wasting time searching for minor injuries, we will need to speak with one another. Since they have the least amount of time, we give priority to saving those who are seriously injured. After Momo was making communications, Midoriya thought that this would be the ideal moment for a double. He made 2 clones of himself, and since they already understood what to do, they started doing the same thing. The original spoke up after they had a few tens of them. I am the original. I made sure that none of you had the initial test targets on your chests. Find the civilians, please. I'll assist in planning the rescue. They all give a nod and take off in various ways. Hey Midoriya, is it not possible for you to simply manipulate every person as you did in Kamino? I could, but you all still need to pass, so get out there or stay to help treat the injured. As Momo distributes the communications, the class enters the city. The clones were working quickly and returning their saves. The majority of them were bleeding out or had broken limbs. Some of the clones stayed to tend to the injured, while the others went out to treat the less injured. When news of the terrorists, who were portrayed by Gang Orca and his agency, reached the public, many civilians were gathered together. Midoriya looked out into the arena and used Quirk Sight to look for Gang Orca. When he found him, he raised his arm and pointed his finger in his direction, and a dark ball encircled by black lightning appeared at the tip of his finger. Dark ball, dark cowl, and pure beam. When Midoriya saw that Gang Orca had deflected the beam, he decided it was time to move himself. A dark beam bursts out from the ball across the arena, visible to the kids on the ground. It hits its target and explodes, sending liquid concrete flying everywhere. Do you think you'll be able to manage this, Momo? I'm capable. Simply leave. Midoriya smiles slightly and nods as wings emerge from his back and he takes off for the terrorists' location. When he gets there, he sees Gang Orca fending off Inasa and Todoroki, who were fighting and not cooperating, which Orca exploited by attacking from behind Todoroki and throwing a sonic wave at him. Midoriya leapt in front of it and took the hit with his wings. Todoroki, you need to focus on the task at hand. Avoid getting in my way. I've got things under control. Doesn't look like it's seeing that I'm here and you two bickering doesn't help anything. Midoriya let Gang Orca's sidekicks completely surround him when they fired their cement gun at him. With him taken care of, we can deal with these heroes easily. The hero looked around at the devastation in the arena, but Midoriya landed both of them far away from the civilians near where the terrorists first appeared. Before he could get close, he wrapped Todoroki and Inasa to the rescue area. Confused, he looked at Midoriya's concrete cocoon, which quickly cracked and blew apart, sending the debris at the terrorists. Midoriya grabbed Gang Orca and took him into the air. Hero, do you think this will stop us? Moving me won't make my thugs stop. Oh, it won't, but it will reduce their morale if their leader is gone. Midoriya touched his own head. Sleep. Adapted echolocation. Midoriya grew some limbs, opened several warp gates to the sidekick's position, and stuck his hand through to grab them after noticing that some of his sidekick were hiding about, attempting to figure out how to get their master out. Sleep. Abruptly, the intercom activates. The test is finished. Every civilian has been brought back. Kindly head to the waiting area. Burst. Well, I guess we're done here. The students gathered in front of a giant board, and the Midoriya clones surrounding the arena burst like bubbles, surprising some who were unaware that it was a clone. Those who passed the test will have their names shown on the board. The names are listed in alphabetical order. Inasa slammed his head on the floor once more, apologizing for ruining Todoroki's exam, but he didn't even acknowledge the gesture as his eyes clouded over, looking at the board. The students gathered around the board, and Izuku found his name fairly easily, but Bakugo and Todoroki weren't there, and they appeared upset at the sight of their missing names. Those who passed will get their temporary license, which enables them to play hero in times of need. A 3-month remedial course will be offered to individuals who fail as a second opportunity to obtain their license. A proctor was instructed to follow them when he arrived in Midoriya, and each of the passing pupils received their license along with an assessment of their performance throughout the test. Hey everyone, we'll get together later. I have a task for the proctors. Oh, I see, Midoriya. See you later. They took him to a room without a window, followed the proctors, and seated him on a metal chair across from him. So why is everything so secret? Mister, do you know what the commission does, Midoriya? What everybody else is aware of. You manage the hero business's logistics, ensuring that everyone is compensated and working to minimize crime. There is much more to the commission than just a logistical firm. Our objective is to extend the tranquility that All Might's ascent has brought about. The need for a new pillar has emerged as he is now functioning at a reduced capacity. The commission thinks you'll be All Might's successor. The truth, Midoriya gave the man a conciliatory smile while maintaining a resolute expression. Although I appreciate you blowing smoke up my ass, could you just tell me what you want from me, or, more accurately, what the commission wants? Our goal is straightforward. Japan's ongoing peace, which was previously upheld by All Might. Fiction. We will give you a full hero license along with a year's worth of All Might's salary. The truth. We will also allow you to retrieve some of the more volatile abilities we have in our care. The truth. With the commission, I could. A sample of what you wear. Within this week if you agree. Can you show me the contract? Midoriya carefully examined the big stack of documents the agent had set in front of him, with a pen on the top page. It appeared to be very favorable, but given their objectives, this was a honeypot. I'll have to think about it for a few days, is that okay? The agents appeared taken aback, but they let him go after granting him his provisional hero license. Midoriya went outside and twisted the document into Nezu's office before they met again, and the class gave him a questioning look as they returned to the bus. Hey, for what reason did they take you away? They just wanted to give a more thorough review they couldn't fit onto my evaluation. Their curiosity was satiated by the response. Bakugo and Todoroki sit alone in their own row, staring blankly into space as they face the back of the bus. After returning to Ua, Midoriya excused himself to go to Nezu's office to talk with him. He enters and observes him furrowed-browed as he reads the contract. He saw Midoriya walk into his office as he looked up. Ah, Midoriya, great to see you. They expected you to read through this. All the terms are somewhat fair but some have been vague. A cup of hot tea was waiting for Midoriya when he settled down on the couch. As Nezu places the contract in front of him, he takes a sip. Their offer is pretty solid. You become the new symbol of peace along with all the perks of being number one, though you will only gain the title when you get out of Ua. In exchange for that, you must complete anything they ask for once every week. These tasks are not restricted, meaning there is nothing they can't get you to do. For the price of your freedom, you get the position of the greatest hero with their support. The truth? Is there nothing about visiting Tartarus? No, there isn't. Did they offer you their prisoners' quirks? Yes, they did. They must have expected I would sign with just the temptation of being a hero early along with the quirks. It would be a great boon to get you there with the commission's permission. I'll negotiate with them to see if I can loosen the shackles they plan to put you in. The class awaited the start of today's hero training the next day. Along with 3 other upperclassmen, Aizawa entered. These 3 are UA's big 3. They're the current strongest hero students in UA. Introduce yourselves. Some students were intimidated by the man with the elf-like ears and indigo hair because of the way he looked at the class. He glanced rapidly toward the wall. I can't do this. I keep picturing their heads as potatoes, but they still have eyes. Large bulging attentive eyes. Come on Tamaki, you can do it. Just like we rehearsed. He instantly regrets turning back to face the class and shakes his head, returning his attention to the whiteboard. I want to go home. The girl with the periwinkle hair gave him a back pat. Okay, you don't need to do it. Ahem. This is Tamaki Amajiki, his quirk is manifest. He's a bit shy as you can see. My name is Negir Hado and my quirk is wave motion. We're all here to teach you about the work studies most of you will go on. Hey, pink girl, are your horns a part of your quirk? I don't th. Do your engines grow back? They're actual L? Why are you so angry looking? What did you call M? Why do you look frustrated? Todoroki gave her a solemn glance. She recognizes Midoriya from the news and tries to approach him, but the final member of the big 3 stops her. Hado, please calm down. Stop putting down things people can't pick up. My name is Mirio Tagata and my quirk. I'll keep it a surprise. Anyway, as Hado said, we are here to teach about the work studies most of you will be going on, and the best way to learn it is by fighting me. The class, with the exception of Bakugo and Todoroki, who had not yet acquired their provisional licenses, changed into their gym uniforms and assembled in Gym Gamma in front of Mirio. Now that everyone is here, who wants to go first? Kirishima rises to the occasion. Mirio's garments abruptly fell to the ground as the class slowly surrounded him. Mirio then seemed to teleport through the room, striking each student in the stomach. Power. At the other end of the class, Mirio stood in front of Midoriya and posed nude. Why didn't you join in with your class? They definitely needed your help. Just wanted to see how you used your quirk worked, and I will say you have worked hard to make that quirk useful for a hero. With his arm aimed toward Midoriya's head, Mirio sprang forward. Mirio punches him in the stomach with his other arm after the arm passes through him. When the fist hits, Mirio flinches away, clutching his swollen knuckles. Man, how are you so tough? Well, when you have taken hits by Prime Might, everything else is kinda weak. Surprised, Mirio tried a different strategy. Rushing at Midoriya once more, He made his hand tangible on the other side and phased it into his chest, binding them together. When he turned off his quirk, his hand was instantly thrust out, drawing him closer to Midoriya, who took advantage of this and elbowed Mirio in the head. At least that's what he had anticipated happening. A little blood drips from Mirio's head as he stumbles back. As soon as Midoriya saw this, he switched permeation and super regeneration back to speed up the healing of his wound. Wow, thanks for that. I feel like I just woke up. As Mirio was putting his clothes back on, the class stood up and held their damaged bodies in front of him. Now, did that give you a better idea about the work studies? What? Do you mean work studies? You just beat the crud out of us. Well, what did you think of my quirk? Your quirk is too strong, senpai. How does it work? Mirio's quirk is permeation. It allows him to phase his body so it becomes intangible, and if he deactivates his quirk in an object it will repel him until he is out of it. It was so strong that the class was astounded by the oddity complementing it. Don't give the quirk too much credit. It took a long time to get the technique down. When I'm phased into an object all my senses are removed until I get out of it. I learned how to take back control of my quirk during my work studies. I learned through experience, so I thought you all should too. The reason why they were all pounded in the gut was now clear to the class. It was to understand that their peculiarities were not all that they were. Shoto and Bakugo gazed at the spectacle with FOMO and envy. They had the impression that they were being abandoned. Izuku was summoned to Nezu's office early the following day. An older, blonde woman wearing a business suit was in the room as he entered. Ah, good morning, Midoriya. It is good you were able to come here this morning. This is the Madam President from the HPSC. The truth, Midoriya shook the woman's hand as she extended it. Nice to meet you, ma'am. I assume this is about the contract your organization has given me. Yes, it is, Midoriya. Both me and the president have hashed out the details and I believe you will like the terms. Since the commission had much less authority over his conduct, the renegotiated terms were in fact much better. Murder, sexual manipulation, oddity experimentation, and interaction with children were no longer among the activities he was required to perform for them. Since they are unable to monitor him constantly, they will monitor his activities through periodic audits. After 5 years, the audits will be carried out yearly for the remainder of his heroic career. The advantages for Midoriya have to be given up with these conditions. He was not to earn All Might's wage, but he was still to be granted a hero license. He still had permission to go to Tartarus, which was set for a few days from now. Midoriya muttered the words as though he were reading them, but he verified their veracity by using either fact or fantasy. Fortunately, everything turned out to be true. He is instructed where to sign the contract after reading it several times. The inked deal was graciously accepted by Madam President, who also awarded Midoriya his new license. It is great to have you on board, Invincible. She left with an atmosphere of dissatisfaction. The office was now empty save for Midoriya and Nezu. So how many strings did you need to pull to make her so pissed off? More than you know, Midoriya. Your work studies are coming up. Did you have anyone in mind to work under? I was thinking of asking you. There has been a rise in the amount of trigger on the streets and I want to help remove some of their suppliers. If they're not accepting, I'll just go with Maruko. She would be more than happy to have her training partner back. Nezu sits for a while, thinking. Sir Night Eye has been cracking down on a Yakuza group called the Shi Hasaikai who have been distributing trigger into the black market. That would be great. Do I need to call him or? Who do you think I am? I'll handle everything. After a few days, an HPSC agent was taking Midoriya to the notorious Tartarus. At the moment, they were traveling toward a metal structure in the ocean on a suspension bridge. The vehicle came to a stop as it approached the entrance, and the agent conversed with the guard. The car is allowed to pass once the guards have given it a thorough inspection. They reach the perimeter of the underground prison's entrance after a few minutes. After parking, Midoriya is searched and escorted through the prison. A prisoner wearing a straitjacket, strapped to a chair, blindfolded, and deafened is carried out into a visitation room. Approach the convict. Midoriya approached him and took hold of his bare neck. Despot taken, adapted from thread creation. After Midoriya lets go, the prisoner is swiftly wheeled away. For the following hour, this pattern persisted. It took several minutes for each prisoner to arrive, and they were either intentionally harmful to their environment or quality of life, or they had a peculiarity that, if released, would hurt many people. Taken from cannibalistic plants, adaptation of spore infection immunity. Taken over. More mental acuity, potency raised. Ice giant captured, increased potency, cold immunity. Ignis taken, heat immunity boosts potency. Heat sink removed, Heat immunity boosts potency. Astrape seized. Increased potency. Resistance to electricity. Taken from a doppelganger. Enhanced potency. Chameleon skin. X-ray obtained. Adapted eye strain resistance. Adapted radiation resistance. Ghost captured. Increased potency. Elevated mental processing. Pripyat seized. Increased potency. Radiation immunity. Taken by gentleman. Adapted for healthy skin. Taken by exponential movement. Adapted muscle tear resistance. Blade tooth removed. Biometal generation enhanced potency. Gas extracted. Adapted from poison resistance. Adapted sedative resistance. Taken from muscle augmentation. Increased potency. Massive muscle growth. Toxic blood extracted. Increased potency. Acid immunity. Taken by Rockman. Adapted from bio-rock generation. Taken from ferrokinesis. Increased potency. Elevated mental processing. They claimed to be bringing the final prisoner. All for One was the prisoner they had coincidentally brought in. Ah, Midoriya, what a pleasure to have my jailer visit. So what is it you want? I'm here for a tasting. I'm sure you're familiar. Oh, they offered that to you. I'm surprised they let you near me, or do they know that I am now powerless? I wouldn't call you exactly powerless. After all, you need to be alive to be judged for your actions. You think they can hold me here? I'll be out sooner than you think. Then I'm sure you're more than fine with a little experiment. The guards were startled when Midoriya seized hold of his head, but they released him. On him, Midoriya experimented with dominance. His hand lit blue, leaving a luminous blue handprint that vanished on All for One's face. Letting go, Midoriya questioned him. Who do you serve? The Viridian Emperor. And who is that? You, my liege. Why do you use that title? Who else but you to deserve such a title? Okay, this is getting weird. Dispel. What the hell did you do to me? Don't use that tone with me. Yes, my league, stop it. Well, that's good to know. All for One was pushed aside and anesthetized in a flash. They led Midoriya out of the jail. Overall, it was a nice day, and he now had a lot of peculiarities to experiment with. Over the course of the following few days, Midoriya identified and enumerated some of the peculiarities. A despot, a thread that can take over a person's body, is released by the user. Consciousness was retained by the controls. Plants that can be cannibalized uses flesh or blood to cultivate carnivorous plants. Dominance, you can completely control someone's mind by touching their face with your palm. Dispel eliminates effects, but regaining control is simple. Giant ice convert into a massive ice golem. Size can be decreased by training until the body is completely encased with ice armor. Ignis fire generation, creation only, no control. Heat sink passively absorbs ambient heat, resulting in the formation of ice on adjacent surfaces. It is possible for absorbed heat to be discharged as a shockwave. Although it is always active, the absorption rate can be raised as desired. Astrape, modification of lighting, quirk synergy. Astrape Zeus, dark cowl, one for all. Zeus, the capacity to produce, direct, and control lightning, which has a blackish gold appearance. After activation, the eyes and hair turn golden. A double permit the user to transform into any human shape or form. X-ray to see through objects. Eyes emit electromagnetic radiation. When used, objects are somewhat irradiated. The ghost develop intangibility and the capacity to own other living things. The Pripyat, while the quirk is active, the body passively emits a lot of gamma radiation. Gentlemen, others view the user as trustworthy to the point that they will be trusted if there is even the slightest suspicion that the user is not at fault. Movement at an exponential rate. Any movement is increased exponentially while the quirk is in effect. This implies that a fully lifted arm can constitute a twitch. Even under sedation, the prior user was at risk of shattering bones and shredding tendons with every twitch. The blade tooth teeth develop into long, sharp blades that puncture objects. Gas, the body releases toxic purple sleeping gas. Blood toxic, the fluoroantimonic acid characteristics of the user's blood can be expelled through a cut. Acid works best on organic materials. Rockman, as hard as diamonds, the entire body turns into rock. Ferrokinesis, the capacity to move ferrous metal telekinetically. Quirk synergy. Ferrokinesis, metal bending, and metal manipulation. Bending of metal, the capacity to manage and work with metal. Mirio was now standing with Midoriya in front of Sir Night-Eye's agency. I'm happy you wanted to work with Sir Night-Eye. You're going to have a great time with Sir. You seem to think highly of him. How was I unable to? It was him who helped me with my peculiarity. I owe him everything. He proved to me that my peculiarity was more than a gimmick. They now stand in the elevator and the rest of the trip is silence. Before you enter, note that Sir has a soft spot for humorous people. Therefore, if you want to work here, you must make him laugh. Alright. Thanks for the advice. When Midoriya enters Night Eye's workplace, she notices a woman with blue skin attached to a tickling machine. Society without humor is worthless. Hey Night Eye, I see that you're still on your crusade. With a hint of resignation and annoyance, Night Eye turned to face Midoriya. Midoriya. It's great to see you again. Well, hearing what you're working on, how could anyone resist? Bubble Girl, Lemillion, could you excuse us? After being freed from her torture, Bubble Girl bowed to Night Eye and hurried out of the office, followed by Mirio, who gave Midoriya the thumbs up before leaving the office. The door closed as Midoriya switched places with his desk between them. Did Nezu share his words with me with you? Not really, but with how serious you are I can assume I'm already in. Yes. Midoriya's work studies form is stamped by Night Eye after he removes a stamp from his pocket and inks it. In the trigger trade, Shi Hasaikai is a relative novice. Kai Chisaki, their boss, has been taking steps to grow his company. They have recently been associated with criminals who go by the name Team Reservoir Dogs. Additionally, there have been rumors that he possesses a weapon that could defeat any hero they come across. It sounds like there's a party going on. Do you know where it's taking place? Unfortunately, an exact location has yet to be determined, but we do have a few areas where their goons tend to gather. Show me. The information was displayed by Night Eye, who saw that a few goons appeared to be patrolling a building, suggesting that they mostly congregate in a few locations, one of which had a high concentration of them. Shi Hasaikai uses the condemned office building as their headquarters. The truth? Fact, Midoriya, you can spend today at home. Since I'll have to change my schedule, I didn't intend for you to start patrolling. The day has not yet begun. May I accompany Mirio? Despite having my license, I have never conducted a patrol. Go forward if Mirio is willing. Avoid doing anything that can draw the attention of the Yakuza organization. For an oracle, you really like to raise flags. PFFT. Night Eye puts his hand over his mouth and gathers his thoughts. Just leave. Sure, see you late Sasaki. Don't use my name, and here I thought you liked humor. As she left the office, Midoriya gave Mirio a suspenseful look. How did it go, then? I think it went smoothly. Lemillion, it's a pleasure working with you. They shake hands and proceed to the sidekick's office, where two other sidekicks were seated at their desks. Bubble Girl from earlier and a man with a centipede for a head who introduced himself as Centipeder. After getting to know his new desk, he joined Mirio on his first patrol, where people started to recognize Midoriya from his altercation with All for One and took pictures of him to send to their friends. When a sudden crowd surrounded them, Mirio, unable to handle it, phased through the crowd and appeared on the opposite side, while Midoriya simply floated above the crowd in an attempt to calm them down and get them to disperse. The man with his gun still raised above the crowd appeared shocked that his attack had failed and attempted to run, but the crowd slowed him down. Midoriya used Warp Gate to grab him and pull him through to him. Now in front of Midoriya, he tried to shoot again, but Midoriya used Ferrokinesis to pull his gun out of his hand. During the entire chaos, preemptive warning went off, and a glass dart was fired at him. Midoriya caught the projectile and warped it to fit inside a drawer on his desk. The man, whose quirk was a steady hands quirk and not particularly spectacular, was attempting to free himself while wearing a strange plague mask and claiming that Midoriya was dirty. With what did you attempt to shoot me? Why in the world would I tell you that you're a freak? I sigh. Come with me to the station. I'm going to leave now, everyone, so you can all go on with your days. Mirio was stunned as the throng gradually scattered after Midoriya opened a huge warp gate and vanished. Did he forget me? He was sent back into Night Eye's agency when a warp portal materialized beneath him. With an irritated expression on his face, Night Eye entered the room where Midoriya had wrapped the dart from his desk to Recovery Girl and was back in Night Eye's office completing the report for the incident today under Bubble Girl's guidance. Hey boss, told you that was a flag. Sigh, did he at least give you anything? Yeah, I caught the syringe he threw at me with his dart pistol before it could pierce me. Recovery Girl is presently inspecting the dart. The attacker did not disclose his employer or the object of his shooting. Well done, Midoriya. I hope there will be more tranquility tomorrow. Flags Sasaki. I told you to refer to me by my hero name. Where's the enjoyment there? Furthermore, Shi Hasaikai must be the subject of whatever flag you have raised. Are you certain you don't possess foresight? I'm not always sure about myself. Can I borrow something, Sasaki? Definitely not. I will not repeat that error. Recovery Girl received the results of the dart's contents the following day. The quirk's precise effects were determined to be quirk nullification for a few minutes, which was a death sentence for any hero in a battle. The results were given to Night Eye, who advised other heroes to wear armored clothing and to be on the lookout for anyone pointing a firearm at them. It was a mixture of chemicals supporting a main ingredient. Blood. Blood from a girl who was 6 years old biologically. Midoriya was leaving the agency when he was recognized by a passerby, and upon realizing this, he returned right away. I suppose this is the best time to test drive a doppelganger. There was the sound of flesh bubbling and writhing in the lobby. Midoriya's face changed, and he now had red eyes, longer jet-back scraggly hair, and a weary appearance that was not too different from Aizawa's. His body lost some of its definition, making him appear more fragile, and the flesh wrapped around his hero costume before changing into an armored suit with black gloves and dress shoes. He went to the window nearby to examine his new look. I should call this guy Akatani because I look like a miniature Aizawa. He opened a warp gate and teleported to the broom closet of a nearby convenience store. As he was leaving, the employee was about to question him, but Midoriya's use of the word, gentleman, changed their entire attitude, and they treated him as though he were the store manager, allowing him to leave without any problems. As he left the store, people didn't pay much attention, but when they did, they nodded politely, so Midoriya decided to investigate the area to find out where Shi Hasaikai was and what forces he possessed. He discovered some of their goons and used gentlemen to disarm them enough to get them to divulge what they knew, which wasn't much, but their base was in a building that had been condemned. As he passed an alleyway, a little girl with long white hair, red eyes, and a small horn growing out of her head ran up to him in terror and embraced him. She was barefoot, wearing what appeared to be an old medical gown, and her arms and legs were bandaged. Help me. Everything will work out. What's your name? Eri. We have to leave now. He will arrive. The truth. Hello Eri. I'm invincible. I'll get you out of here, so don't worry. Hey, hero. A tall man with golden eyes and auburn hair, dressed in white gloves and a plague mask, cried out to him. Thank you for taking care of my daughter, Fiction. She has a habit of running off to God knows where. The truth? Come on, we don't want to cause too much trouble for the hero, do we? Eri hesitates when she looks at him and is about to leave Izuku, but he keeps her near. Are you certain you want to accompany him back? Eri looks back up at Izuku and is mute, staring down in fear. No, the truth. Listen to me, Eri. You are aware of how this ends. The truth. While Midoriya drew Eri nearer to him, Overhaul extended his hand in his direction. Sir, I would love to drag this fight out, but unfortunately Eri's safety is more important. Overhaul tries to resist by grasping Midoriya's arm and dissolving him, but it doesn't work. He lets out gasping gasps as dominance does its work, and he goes limp as he falls kneeling on the ground as a warp gate opens in front of him and a hand reaches through to grab him by the face. Modification made. Who are you serving? Overhaul gives him a submissive awe. The Green King. What are you looking for in me? Oh, King. Eri gazed at the scene, bewildered. Did you make the quirk nullifying darts with this kid? Yes, sir. I was able to make them out of her tissue and blood. I've been able to create permanent additions, but the ones I've given to my subordinates can only suppress a quirk for a short while. Eri buried her face in Izuku's chest as her nightmare flashed before her eyes, and Izuku calmed her down by patting her back slowly while she gripped his chest tightly. Izuku grimaced a little when he heard a Yakuza leader talk like way about what he had done to her. Lead me to them. All at once. Oh, King. Please behave as you did previously. You don't want me to be bothered by your subordinates, do you? Eri had been hiding her face, but now she looked up at Izuku, who smiled gently in a way reminiscent of All Might, and Midoriya seized him, returning his quirk for the time being in case he needed to use it. Overhaul's manner changed, becoming more cold and calculating. Don't worry, I'll protect you. Sleep. Overhaul led him through some back alleys until they arrived at their compound, where two goons were guarding the door to keep anyone from approaching. As soon as they saw Overhaul, they opened the door without hesitation, allowing them entry. She smashes her face back into the shape-shifted suit and goes to sleep. Get the chronostasis, mimic, and bullets together, and instruct them to come to my office. We have a visitor. The goon nods and leaves the building. Overhaul guides Midoriya into his office and tells him to sit down. Using Overhaul on the floor, he opens a heavy-duty safe that is embedded in the ground. He pulls out a briefcase with a metal lining on the back and opens it in front of Midoriya. He checks the contents and discovers 5 glass vials that are kept safe in black foam padding. He warps the briefcase to his room in Ua. Overhaul shuts the safe and puts the concrete back down. As if on cue, the people he had called came in one by one. They were shocked to see Eri sleeping in a stranger's arms, but they couldn't question their boss, so they chose to ignore it for the time being. All of you ought to have arrived sooner. If a hero arrived first, how would I respond? The boss seems irritable today. Sorry boss, won't happen again. All of you will see to it that it does. We need to serve a very important guest. Serve, they tried to scream, but as soon as they opened their mouths, they were restrained by green bands that appeared around them. Midoriya shut off the doppelganger and approached each of them, including Overhaul, who removed their peculiarities and put them to sleep. Modification made. Crystallize extracted. Quirk synergy. Crystallize Diamond Head, Rockman. Sloshed taken. Accusation made. Taking a strongarm. Theft of property. Food consumed. Taken from energy suck. Imitated. Taking chromosostasis. Removed barrier. Wake up. Eri opened her eyes blearily and saw that she was back at the base. She was a little alarmed to see Overhaul's office, but her anxiety was calmed by the confusion of seeing the bad guys asleep and bound. Hey, Eri. She stared at Midoriya, perplexed by her hero's transformation. Unbeatable. Yes, I am. I was shocked that you could still identify me. Do you want to know my real name? My hero name is Invincible. She gives a nod. Izuku, Midoriya is who I am. Could you explain your pain from Overhaul? Confession was what Midoriya was using. My peculiarity was cursed, he claimed. That he would protect everyone from me. Would you mind if I took your quirk? Eri gave him a nervous glance. I refuse to use the blood that was extracted from you. I can both give and receive peculiarities. I'll give you one of mine. Can I? Izuku nods. Please take it. Okay. I'll tell you what I have, and if in the future you want your quirk back, I'll give it to you. She had chosen to take dragon wings that had belonged to the white Nomu back during the Hosu incident, and Izuku advised her which of his quirks were safe to employ once Eri nodded. Taken backward. Given dragon wings. In an attempt to relieve the tension caused by the bulging back of her gown, Midoriya formed an energy knife, and scarlet wings emerged from the newly opened holes. Eri was astonished by the shiny new wings and began flapping them, which caused her to float out of Izuku's hands. She began to fly around the room, but she soon became exhausted and was caught, and the wings were attracted back into her back as her eyes grew tired. I'm going to phone my boss, Eri, and ask him to take a picture of everyone present. Is that acceptable? She gives a nod. Night Eye swiftly answers the phone when Midoriya calls him. Don't tell me Shi Hasaikai found you. I don't think you need to worry about them anymore. Midoriya. What did you do? The Shi Hasaikai may have been destroyed by me. There will be a lot of paperwork, I sigh. The police assembled by Night Eye apprehended the whole Yakuza group in the next 30 minutes. Night Eye rushed into Overhaul's office where Midoriya was sitting. He glanced at Midoriya, who was reading the research materials Overhaul had given him while seated in a leather chair with a small girl with white hair cradling him in her arms. In relation to Overhaul, he stood like a butler by the chair's side. Overhaul had removed his gloves and mask, and although he was trembling a little as he watched, his face did not convey how uncomfortable he was. A stack of unconscious bodies, still bound, stood at one side of the room. Invincible, can you tell me why I'm seeing any of this? I needed to kill time until you got here, so what else was I supposed to do? You could have helped us with the rest of the Yakuza upstairs, and why is Overhaul shivering while serving you like a butler? You could have handled it and I got a gift from the higher-ups. Sigh just. Get these villains upstairs. Alright, it's been fun having you as my butler, Display. Overhaul fell to the ground instantly and began searching for something. He began to panic when he couldn't find it. Not clean. He began to scratch at the spot where Midoriya had touched him, but Midoriya quickly stopped him by taking back control. After calming down, Overhaul wipes his face with a napkin. I apologize for having you see that, my king, no worries. Overhaul squirms a little as Midoriya touches him and heals his face with his quirk. Night Eye's expression was one of disbelief as he observed the event. We're leaving. There was a sizable ring of police and emergency cars waiting outside as he appeared with Eri in his arms and a warp gate. After entering the gate, Night Eye summoned some police to accompany the restrained crooks. To see how the girl in his arms was doing, an EMT rushed up to Midoriya. After examining her, they instructed Midoriya to wake her up so they could see behind the bandages. She was gently awakened by Midoriya. Eri was shocked by the change of surroundings when she opened her eyes. Her newly acquired wings sprang from her back and encircled Midoriya and herself. Eri, don't worry. They're here to assist. With a weary glance at those surrounding her, Eri carefully withdrew the wing. Is it acceptable for them to see beneath the bandages? Eri appeared frightened. Please don't go, okay? I'll be just by your side. Eri cringed as the EMT approached to examine the scars, which were covered in old scars older than her own, almost as if they had been painted on. The EMT carefully and slowly unwrapped the bandages. It's all right, Eri. Would you like to go to bed till they've finished checking? She gives a nod. Sleep. The EMT concluded that she was malnourished and lacked the nutrients that she would typically receive from being outside on a regular basis, and they suggested that Midoriya accompany the kid to the hospital for additional tests once she shuts her eyes and goes to sleep. Midoriya left the scene after observing that people were recording with their phones up. The entire incident was reported on the news the following day, with the headline, Hero Trainee Invincible Takes Down Yakuza Group, appealing to many. Night Eye promoted the report that said that Invincible, in disguise, had confronted the leader of the Yakuza group and found that they were using a little girl's biological material to create drugs that destroy quirks and the antidote in order to establish a monopoly rise to power with the ultimate goal of eradicating quirks completely. The entire Yakuza group was arrested, largely amicably, because the elites were preoccupied with Invincible. Shirtless photos from the sports festival went viral online as his fans made fan edits or thirsted for him, and the public responded favorably to the report because it only documented the end of the operation, meaning that the issue was handled quietly and without interfering with their daily lives through damaged roads and buildings. A video of Invincible tenderly tending to the young girl had attracted a sizable female fanbase and sparked rumors about his romantic life. Nezu brought Eri into UA and adopted her, allowing 13, Cementos, and Midoriya to assist with her care while he took over her education. He found it to be a pleasant challenge because he hadn't had the chance to teach a kid so young before, and he was able to see firsthand how he could shape the future generation. They were no longer a threat to the public, but they still had a long way to go before they could join them. Tenko and his group have been in therapy. The people who needed it the most were Dabi, who was having trouble deciding whether or not he wanted to reveal himself to Todoroki. Twice, who was still dealing with the effects of years of fear and paranoia. And Toga, who was having problems with their quirk interfering with her mental health. Izuku trusted Nezu to keep the quirk-destroying medication vials secure for the future, and it was now up to him to decide what he would do with them. After 2 months, UA held its annual school festival, where classes are encouraged to host an event and the school is open to the public. Class 1A was in the dorms discussing their plans when Mineta suggested that they open a maid cafe. Midoriya then suggested that they open a themed restaurant, building on Mineta's idea. The class can sell food themed after themselves, which can be a nice boost to their image. The class started excitedly brainstorming what foods they would best represent themselves, and Momo made some paper and pen and paper to jot down some of the ideas. Although disappointed that they weren't doing a maid cafe, Mineta was content with them wearing their hero costumes, and he subtly expressed this idea, which caused Tsuyu to slap him in the back of his head. When their plan was finalized a few days later, each student had 20 items on the menu, including Bakugo's Hot Blast ice cream, which had hot sauce as a main ingredient, and Todoroki's fried ice cream, which was a blob of ice cream wrapped in a pastry and fried together for a few seconds, a suggestion made by Midoriya because Todoroki only wanted cold soba as his dish and it didn't fit a cafe menu. Many students thought the ice cream would taste bad, but after trying it, they enjoyed the unusual flavor. The class was decked out in their respective colors and signature devices, and while the rest of the class concentrated on serving the guests, Midoriya was going to be the main chef, using his clones to fill out the kitchen staff. Sato was having trouble deciding on a single dish, so he was going to run his own confectionery, making the pastries. Kaminari suggested that they have live music playing, and after a few others in the class agreed, she initially refused. Prior to the performance, the girls would be the main attraction, but since there weren't many of them, Midoriya decided to try something to help them. His body began to change in shape, and the sounds of writhing flesh made some of them feel queasy. When it was all over, Midoriya looked much more feminine, with assets included, which Mineta screamed about. The girls were thrilled by this and decided to have this form called Girldoria wandering around the festival advertising the cafe. Midoriya was taken aback by the change and started to check herself out. On the day of the festival, Midoriya left some clones in the class to help set up the cafe while he went to the supermarket. After getting the supplies, Midoriya decided to do an impromptu patrol and walked past a cafe where he saw a familiar pair. An older man in a fancy outfit and a smaller red-haired woman wearing similar clothing at a tea shop. These two were known on the internet for recording their schemes, and they were the Gentle Criminal and La Brava. Midoriya warped the groceries back to Ua and approached them. As soon as Gentle saw Invincible approaching their table, he snatched up La Brava and launched himself straight into a warp gate, appearing in front of Invincible and placing La Brava behind him. Hey, Gentle just wanted to talk. Gentle appeared perplexed. Typically, heroes would inform people that they were being arrested. Why are you both wearing your costumes while you're out and about? Gentle was forced to respond. We were going to infiltrate UA's festival to show that civilians aren't safe. After he finished speaking, Gentle made a hasty attempt to cover his mouth. After that, there will be an issue. You won't reach the proper individuals if you go about interfering with a festival. I understand your intentions, but if they harm the public, you will be labeled as villains. Gentle attempted to run once more, but he and La Brava were instantly restrained from moving by green bands. Sorry about this, but you're not being arrested. I just have someone who would love to meet you. Warping them back into UA, they showed up just outside Nezu's office, where he was browsing over some documents. He knew it was going to be a busy week when he looked up to see the evil duo Midoriya had tried them up. After leaving Nezu to deal with the criminals, Midoriya went back to the cafe to find it bustling, with tables full of happy patrons and a few younger men watching the Gildoria clones passing by and handing out flyers. Many of them were ejected by Mineta, who called them all pedos for sneering at minors. The kitchen was open to the dining area, making it a spectacle as their food was prepared by clones with various peculiarities to expedite the cooking process, and Midoriya jumped in behind the kitchens to observe how things were going. When Cementos entered with Eri, who was marveling at the cafe's decor, it was almost midday. Midoriya Prime came out to welcome them, and Eri rushed up to embrace him with excitement. Hey Eri, how was the festival for you? She started to rapidly and enthusiastically describe all she had seen today, but she also expressed how pleased she was to see the restaurant after seeing the Gildoria clones. Eri requested Midoriya's dish, which was a green caramel apple with rainbow sprinkles and Aoyama's sparkle sparkle splash, while Cementos wanted Ida's Zoom Zoom coffee. Midoriya took both Cementos and Eri to an open table and instructed them to order anything they wanted. Their orders arrived after a few minutes, and while Cementos sipped his coffee comfortably, Eri was amazed by the sparkling apples and drink. Eri's face lit up with joy as she carefully bit into the apple, and the show was about to begin. The light went down, and the spotlights were aimed at the stage, with Jiro on the mic and bass, Kaminari and Tokiyami on guitar, Momo on piano, and, surprisingly, Bakugo on drums. They sang a song that Jiro had written himself, and the audience got into the mood and started dancing. Since Eri was a little uneasy in front of the big crowd, Midoriya lifted her up and carried her on his shoulders. Mineta and a clone overseen the stage's special effects to ensure that everything went smoothly, and the audience applauded as the musicians thanked them. Bakugo and Todoroki had been attending their remedial sessions for their provisional licenses diligently for months, despite Bakugo's constant insistence that everyone else not slack off so that he will be pushed by the class. The class was guessing who would be in the top 10, and of course, All Might was still number 1, albeit at a reduced capacity. The hero billboard chart JP was approaching, and everyone was in the lounge, except for Todoroki, waiting for the event to start. The announcer kicked off the event. At number 1, All Might took the stage in Small Might form, and the audience fell silent as he was handed the microphone. The top 10 were introduced in descending order, with Gang Orca at number 10 and the other top 10s following. Each hero spoke of their new objectives or a reaffirmation of their resolve. Hello everyone, this may be my last visit. As my hero actions come to an end, my time limit has been decreasing. I have been a symbol of this country for 35 years, keeping the peace during that time. Many years ago, I stated that in order to sustain this society, new heroes would have to emerge. Now is the moment, and I'm excited to see what they can all do. Exceed. Plus Ultra. Plus Ultra. Everyone must die. Above the crowd, a gun barrel was visible as it fired. Time slowed as the crowd waited for the shot to land, but it never did. A green portal swallowed the bullet in its path. The crowd watched the portal disappear. A larger green portal opened in front of the attacker, and Invincible walked through it. The attacker fired his gun at him, but each bullet crumpled and fell to the ground. Midoriya grabbed them by the neck and used confession. With whom are you? What? I am alone myself. Fiction. As he uses the barrier to cover the entire hall and stage, Midoriya's eyes widen. A bullet hits the barrier's exterior, causing it to ripple. Midoriya looked around and saw a sniper on a rooftop hastily packing away his weapon, warping him into the barrier without his gun. He is protected from the first attacker by green construct bands that reach the ground to keep him upright. Now this is all of you. The truth at that moment, One of the bystanders approached Midoriya with his phones in hand, and security pushed their way to his place, thanking him for his assistance in cuffing the attackers. Hello. This is Shueisha Publishing's Chito's Kazuki. I believe I speak for the entire country when I say that we are grateful that you have protected All Might. I would like to know why you intervened. There must have been security measures in place to guarantee the protection of All Might. I knew I had to do something when I noticed the barrel in the crowd. All Might's time as a hero would have been significantly diminished if he had used up his allotted time for the day. Who wouldn't jump in, so I did? Everyone in the audience, even the heroes on stage, undoubtedly wanted to intervene even if they were the ones who would have been shot. I understand. Are you planning to stay for the remainder of the event? No, I won't. I must return to the dormitories. The fact that I simply vanished from the couch should startle them greatly. Be patient before leaving. What advice would you give the villains that intend to attack All Might once more? When the camera zoomed closer, Midoriya glanced directly into it and saw that it was filming the situation. To the Shadow Dwellers. When the light strikes your lifeless eyes, clouded with the desire to harm and do evil, you scurry. We'll always be here for you when the time comes. Midoriya is swallowed whole by a warp gate that appears behind him, leaving behind an empty area where he used to be. A few days had gone by, and the anticipated increase in crime was far less than the public had anticipated from the purported final appearance of the peace symbol. The nation had been stunned by the attempted assassination of the retiring All Might and the unexpected arrival of Invincible. When Invincible's spontaneous interview with Shueisha Publishing was published, the public agreed with his views and there was conjecture that Midoriya was more than prepared to take All Might's position as the new peace symbol, or at the very least, the new #1 hero. The video of Invincible stopping the would-be killers was going viral on the internet and on news stations. His last words to the villains were particularly powerful, and many people thought that this was what all heroes should strive for, to become so great that evildoers would be afraid to approach the light of peace. Invincible's fame soared following the incident. His reluctance only encouraged them because if one of them could get the autograph, that was the only chance they had to get a rare item from a rising hero. Midoriya had to warp to places every day and use Doppelganger if he was outside of UA because people would be waiting to spot him and alert a massive crowd who wanted the signature of a rising hero. He was the successor of the Symbol of Peace, a title that was tacked onto his already lofty hero name. Today was a special training day as the two classes will be working together as a team to defeat villains. The class was wondering who the villain would be until they noticed that Midoriya had disappeared from where he had been standing before they assembled in front of their homeroom teachers in one of the mock cities. I'm happy you picked it up fast. Training today will pit you all against a foe who has a significant advantage. If he destroys the city, kills every civilian, and beats or captures every one of you, he wins. If the classes are able to fight the villain or save half of the civilians, they win. To give you all a little advantage, Midoriya will only be able to use All Might's fighting style during his exam. The students concurred and started organizing their strategy. Bakugo, being the conceited hothead he was, thought their strategy was foolish and wanted to just rush at Midoriya. When the class informed him that this would only lead to his elimination, it infuriated him. He blasted himself into the city when the training began. The classes had devised a plan to have their strongest run interference while the others attempted to save as many civilians as they could. However, just as they were ready to disperse, something fell from the sky into the center of their group. Bakugo's body was found unconscious, and the class searched for Midoriya but he was nowhere to be found. Bakugo was taken away by some Metabots as the class dispersed throughout the city, and the distraction team was made up of the strongest members of the class. Those who could take a hit and flee, and as they ran through the city, an air blast threw them backward. They looked up to see buildings in a cone shape destroyed, and before any of them could believe it, Midoriya was already in front of them. To stop me, they sent a force this little, what a farce. Midoriya pushed the air in front of him and the assault group into the ground. Kirishima pushed himself up quickly and rushed Midoriya, who just stood there and took it. Kirishima continued to punch and punch, but the blows had no effect on Midoriya, even though they had given the others time to get up. A few of them retreated as a wave of ice moved, encasing Midoriya in a massive glacier, and when Midoriya broke out of it, he saw that the group was gone. The civilians were being transported to the rescue zone by the remaining students. 20% of civilians have been eliminated. They had only 80% of the game left, and the announcement startled the classes. They were beginning to panic, but Momo calmed them down and they stuck to their plan. After a few minutes, they had saved 45% of the civilians and were rushing for the remaining 5%. They looked all over the city, but they couldn't find anyone, until they saw Midoriya standing in the plaza with the remaining civilians. Now, what should we do? He has undoubtedly already seen us. In order for the rest of us to save as many civilians as possible, some of us will need to divert his attention sufficiently. The classes nod. They send anyone with a ranged quirk, which can cause dust to float and obstruct Midoriya's vision. When they were all ready, they fired simultaneously. Midoriya was surrounded by a variety of quirks and a few smoke bombs, which made him and the civilians invisible. The heroes rush in, but before they can grab any of the civilians, the dust is blasted away, revealing Midoriya standing there by himself with his hands together. 50% of civilians have been eliminated. This startled the classes, who had inspected every structure and wondered where the other civilians were. At last, things can start to get fascinating. You have all been avoiding me like the plague and racing around like rats. I believe it's time for me to go hunting. Midoriya vanished and then reappeared with the rest of the ranged assault group unconscious around him. The other heroes appeared nervous but were prepared to face whatever came next, which made Midoriya smile. He vanishes again, this time taking them all out one by one, which makes some of the group lose their composure and flee, but they never make it far because they are the next targets. Eventually, only Midoriya was left standing around unconscious bodies. Villain wins. Bakugo woke up first, looking around, still prepared to fight, and Midoriya wrapped him in green bands so he wouldn't damage anything. He was admonished by Recovery Girl for making her stay late when Midoriya twisted the unconscious pupils to a recovery tent. Slow down. The training is finished. Bakugo's expression fell and his rage returned. What on earth went wrong? Bakugo glanced around the room and saw that the class was still comatose. They required your assistance. You faced me by alone, even if you might have held the secret to this. If none of them were able to take action, then they are simply feeble. What does that reveal about you, then? To demonstrate your superiority, you abandoned them. That you might complete this task before they get an opportunity to meet me. I threw you into the group after knocking you out and picking up your unconscious body. Are you aware of what took place? They became overly cautious. They would never take the chance of approaching you. You're correct. They didn't want to become like you, so they weren't prepared to take chances. One piece is missing. A drawback. They required every ounce of power they possessed, and you dismissed that idea for what? Your pride. Someone who knew me was what they needed. Understood my movements. How I would approach this task. However, I know absolutely nothing about you. You have only gotten stronger since you arrived here. You were constantly with me at every turn. USJ, the sports festival, Stain Island, and the first training. I was at a loss for what to think after All for One. All Might had declared his retirement. To give up after all. I must always and forever be number one. I couldn't be like him. Being a hero doesn't have to be about winning and dominating. Didn't Ua demonstrate that to you? Didn't All Might demonstrate that to you? Additional than All Might. There are many additional heroes. Beating villains isn't the only way to win. Because it will always be a tragedy if civilians are killed, even if the culprit is apprehended. Your emphasis is the issue, not your desire to win. You will only discover anger toward everyone who is superior to you in any way if your only concern is winning. For a brief moment, Bakugo was silent as he reflected on his life before Ua. He recalled how he first learned of Midoriya's quirk, which was weak at first but that he knew would eventually grow stronger than him. By the time they were in middle school, groups of people from other schools would frequently challenge Midoriya to a fight, but Midoriya would always come out stronger. He wanted to be the best, but the game was rigged from the beginning. The fight with All for One was a prime example of how, despite the hero's best efforts to stop the beast that was All for One, Midoriya stood tall facing a monster and defeated what All Might failed to do with a single blow. He felt unfortunate that he wasn't born with Midoriya's quirk because he wanted all that strength, the invulnerability, and the presence he exuded when he faced villains. He looked back at Midoriya and spoke softly. Leave me alone. Bakugo was left to his thoughts as Midoriya quietly rose and departed. The class was supposed to start a hero agency on Naboo Island following Christmas. They were to remain there until their responsibilities could be assumed by a suitable hero. When the students learned where they were heading, they became quite thrilled. A lot of them believed it would be a pleasant getaway from the commotion. Since then, a week has passed, and the class has been helping the natives around the island with small chores because there were about 1,000 people living there. The class was based in an old building, answering calls and providing assistance as needed. For the most part, Midoriya had been acting as a chaperone, guiding the students to the appropriate location on the island. Katsuma Shimano, a missing youngster, was the subject of one of the calls. Midoriya chose to attend since the majority of the class was absent. Searching for the young youngster, He twisted into the air and peered down upon the island. He flew down to him after finding him on a hill close to the town's edge that overlooked the harbor. "Hey, are you Katsuma?" Before he could reply, a young girl came sliding down a slide and stepped between the kid and Izuku, who appeared thrilled to see him. "What kind of hero are you? Look how long it took you to get here." She showed Midoriya her phone. The timer read 7 minutes and 32 seconds. "I'd say that's pretty good, though I'm an exception. Not every hero can fly and teleport." Still something could have happened when you were searching. Come on Katsuma, let's leave these lazy heroes." The female was followed by the uncertain-looking boy. Midoriya sighed and shook his head. Since heroes first came to the island, that young girl, Mahoru Shimano, seemed to have a thing for detesting them. She always includes her brother in her plots. Someone had to return to base, thus Midoriya's phone rang. With the exception of Bakugo, who stayed at base reading magazines on the pretext of protecting the agency from villains, and Midoriya, who was never tried for very long, everyone was exhausted at the end of the day from rushing about all day. Many of the town's residents entered from the hallway with plates of food as a token of appreciation for their labor, which the class found admirable. Later that evening, while enjoying a peaceful view of the illuminated town from above, Midoriya noticed Katsuma sprinting in the direction of the agency building. Katsuma swiftly screamed at Midoriya as she flew down at him. "There's a villain in the castle ruins. You want to come with me to check it out?" Izuku opens a warp portal to the ruins, and the youngster nods. A gigantic mantis is visible in the distance while strolling through Izuku. Izuku flicks an air cannon at the beast as the villain rushes towards him after spotting them. The blast passes through the beast as if it were immaterial, having no effect on either party. Using oddity sight, Izuku scans the area and spots Mahoru concealed behind a wall. With its claw aimed at Midoriya, the mantis lunges at him, but it passes right through him. Mahoru pouts when she emerges from her hiding place. "Can't you at least act scared? Can't really do that when I know what your quirk is. It's pretty good. You could summon any hero you want to scare off bad guys." "Then why can't I scare you? Maybe I'm not scared of mantises." As she pulls Katsuma away, her pout gets bigger. "Bye, Mr. Invincible. Have a nice night, Katsuma." When the following day finally arrived, Midoriya got up rather early and went about his morning routine. He ate breakfast after his run and looked about the island. He sees something he believes he has dealt with as he looks out toward the harbor. All for one, but with 5 quirks surrounding it and 1 quirk out to the side, it appeared little. After finishing his meal and dressing up like a superhero, Midoriya sent a message to the class informing them that he was going to investigate. He sees a ferry with just 4 people on the bridge, warping above where he observed the oddities. Midoriya moved the ship closer to the ocean's center by using the warp gate. When the villains realized this, they rushed to the top deck and looked around to find out who had moved them. When Midoriya's feet contacted the deck like he was stepping down from a curb, he abruptly stopped with a soft thud and turned off flight, falling directly onto the upper deck. He approached the white-haired criminal who utilized confession and had all for one. "Greetings from Japan's Middle Sea. Why did you travel to Naboo Island?" "I'm here to receive a quirk that will help me get well again. Who are you?" "I can tell you've been living under a rock because you had to ask that when your groupies were anxious." "I defeated all for one because I am the unstoppable hero. Invincible. Even if it's a weakened duplicate, I can presume the good doctor gave you all for one." When his eyes turned yellow, the villain triggered scanning. He looked at Invincible and saw a rainbow of flames shooting into the air, something he had never seen before, and it scared him. He turned to try to run, but Invincible was in front of him, blocking his path. The villain raised his hands and fired light purple lasers from his fingertips, circling Invincible to try to find a weak spot. The laser exploded on contact, obscuring him from view and forcing the villain to back off. Everyone is gathered around him. He hasn't fallen yet. The dust cloud gradually dispersed, exposing Invincible entirely uninjured, and the other members hurried around it, alert for any changes. "That's interesting, I have something quite similar." Unblemished beam dark ball. Invincible lifted a finger, and a dark ball floated at the tip of it. The red-headed girl of the group ran towards the white-haired villain, who was breathing heavily and had purple veins running across his face, as a dark purple laser pierced through and broke a few layers of the yellow barriers he had raised to stop the attack. "How are you, 9? "I'm all right, Slice." "Pay attention to him. All I have to do is approach." "Oh, come as close as you like. There's no need for all the fanfare. I'll even let you to touch me." 9 appeared perplexed but chose not to follow his instructions as Invincible extended his hand. The other 2 appeared to have grown impatient during the confrontation. as red mummies attached to one of them rushed Invincible, who merely waved his arm, causing the mummies to unravel. The other member, who had a wolf-like mutation quirk with bird talons for hands, attempted to punch him but failed when his fist made contact. Slice saw this and shot strands of hair from her head at Invincible, which also exploded. The villains dispersed as a cloud of dust obscured Invincible's vision, and the Wolfman attempted to fly away with his newly grown wings, but green constructs seized him and drew him towards Invincible, who took his quirk. Taken from Chimera, when he lost his quirk, his monstrous features vanished, revealing a large black man with his old dreadlocks. He collapsed on his hands and knees, staring at his transformed body. "What have you done to me, W? I removed your peculiarity. Why do you follow 9, please? After destroying an entire city, he spared me. He claimed to have recognized his former self in me. We were shunned because of something beyond our control. In order to demonstrate to them who is actually at the top of the food chain, I followed. Go to sleep." After the man passes out, he is taken to the agency's holding cell. Invincible turned to see that the other 3 had already left. So much for camaraderie. Using quirk sight, he sees 9 and Slice moving slowly on the lower deck while the mummy guy goes about making more mummies. Choosing to save the best for last, he warped to his location. The villain was using his quirk on anything he could see until he ran into Invincible, who suddenly appeared in front of him. He quickly sent his golems at him, which were easily smacked away, causing them to unravel. The man panicked and sent his minions at Invincible while he was attempting to flee, but he ended up at a dead end with a few minions to his name. When he turned around, he saw Invincible staring at him with a bored expression. Well, I guess this is the end of the line. When the villain sees Invincible transformed, the strain in his shoulders goes away, and he throws his red bandages at him, wrapping them over him without replying. "Sigh for all the strength, you're pretty careless." The villain's eyes widened as he retreated against a wall as the bandages abruptly exploded, consuming them in blue flame. "Yeah, that's on purpose, like how you led me to believe you had no more tricks." Taking hold of his cranium, Invincible took his quirk. Taken from Mummy. Sleep. The villain is also sent to the holding cell after he passes out. As he emerges from the Farah's depths, he witnesses a small lifeboat speeding away. Invincible opens a warp gate in front of the lifeboat, but it is unable to avoid the portal and crashes back onto the top deck. Invincible warped himself up there and saw 9 on the floor with Slice attempting to help him up. "Enough of the games. It's time for you two to stop acting like cowards." With Slice's help, 9 stands up and pushes himself away from her. "So what are we meant to do? You already have Mummy and Chimera. I have yet to see your bold leader's full strength. He has that weather quirk, for example." As the clouds above gathered and darkened, 9 furrowed his brow and his eyes glowed red. Flashes of light were visible in the spinning mass, and lightning struck Invincible, arching across the deck's surface and making it glow red hot. Midoriya stood in the center of the devastation, with lightning still arching across his body. Not B. With a loud clang, 2 big blue metallic serpents flew at him and crashed into his palms. "Unfortunately, I can also understand why you adopted the peculiarities you did. Regretfully, you will have to give them back to me." She turned her hair into huge blades and slashed and stabbed at him, but each blow brushed off his body, sending sparks flying, until an arm reached out and grabbed onto Slice's face in the midst of the chaos. Midoriya had appeared in front of 9's hand near his face, but an explosion sent 9 flying. 9 was pointing the yellow barrier at Invincible. "Cut a Slice. Sleep." Invincible turned to face 9 and approached him cautiously as Slice passes out, her hair going limp as she is twisted away. 9 gazed at the scene with a mixture of terror and sarcasm. "So, this is how helpless their fight against me felt." 9 responded by using every offensive ability he has. Not seeing a point in not going all out, the purple tubes on 9's back began to inject their contents into 9, making the markings on his face recede, and he took off his mask, revealing an angry scowl. His eyes glowed red and the clouds above intensified, and he raised his hand and summoned the yellow shield, which shot out an air cannon at Invincible. The cannon blew some of his hair back, but otherwise, it looked like a gust of wind blew by. Purple lasers fired from 9's hands trying to shoot Invincible away, but he just walked through them unaffected as the lasers curved around his body. The metallic serpents flew at Invincible, striking like snakes as lightning from above channeled through the serpents, increasing their speed. The onslaught continued until Invincible was standing a few feet from a tired and almost completely purple 9, panting heavily and barely standing, looking at Invincible, who had a bored expression on his face. "Anything you want to say before this all ends?" was destined to transform this globe. Nobody would have to have a sense of alienation. That's a commendable objective. Regretfully, you did it completely incorrectly. Midoriya touched his own head. Manipulation of the weather. Taken all for one, weakened, scan taken. Hydra taken. Taken from the airwall, taken with a bullet laser. Type a cell activation taken. Sleep. Midoriya receives a call as Warping 9 returns to base. Hello, Midoriya speaking. Where are you at the moment, Midoriya? Oh, only the ocean's center. Were the restraints favorably received by our villains? They appeared to be so. Out of it once they arrived. How did you handle them? They'll be all right. I only roughed them up a bit. I have to dock the ship they took, so I'll be right back. The townspeople were initially perplexed as to why a ferry was arriving on the island at such an early hour, so Midoriya flew above it and landed close to the crowd to explain the situation. After hearing the entire explanation, they expressed gratitude to Midoriya for his efforts and were relieved that the villains were prevented from entering the island. After ensuring that the ferry was securely fastened, he warped back to the agency for another debriefing to the class, and everyone was relieved that the villains were dealt with, though Bakugo was upset that he was unable to get a hit in. Then, at Nezu's office, Midoriya twisted back into UA, momentarily startling the Chimera. What a surprise, Midoriya. Has it been productive for you on the island? I'm not here for that, but it's a pleasant change of pace. I assume you are aware of 9. Obviously. Have you met him? Is the classroom secure? Yes, they are all right. Before they could reach the island, I managed to intercept them. Could you please put me in touch with the folks 9 stole from? Nezu was able to accomplish this, and Midoriya went to each of them to return the items that had been taken from them. They were all very appreciative of having their peculiarities restored, and he warped back inside the island after returning all but one. The remainder of their stay there went rather smoothly, and Katsuma had been more frequent around Midoriya, constantly observing him assist throughout town with a motivated expression on his face. Hey, Katsuma. Hi, sir. Oh, don't refer to me like that. I feel elderly because of that. You have an edge shot pin there. Don't you have a strong affinity for heroes? My goal is to become a hero. Similar to Dad. Having that dream is wonderful. How heroic is your father? The best. I will be exactly like him. After that, you'll have to train. To save everyone, you'll need to have the strength. But my quirk isn't strong. Avoid discussing your peculiarity in such a manner. Not even its entire potential has been utilized by you. What are you saying? Only I and other people can be healed by my quirk. My big sister just wants me to stay and pursue a career in medicine. The ability to repair oneself is crucial. Are you aware of how muscles develop? Not really. Then we have much to work on. Over the course of the following few days, Midoriya helped Katsuma strengthen his progress and efficiency by teaching him how to train his body while utilizing his quirk to its fullest. After recovering from the villain attack, Katsuma and Mahoro's father returned, and Midoriya was waiting at the entrance to their house when the three of them arrived home. Hey hero, why have you come to see us? Just here to return something. The bewildered father accepted Midoriya's hand, felt strange for a while, then felt complete again, and let out a sigh, letting go of stress he was unaware he possessed. How did you treat Daddy? A villain stole your father's peculiarity. I'm simply returning it, just as I did with the other stuff he took. After a while, it was time to depart, and the class boarded their ferry and began to slowly pull out of the harbor. The entire village came and waved them off, thanking them for their time there, and Midoriya appeared to be lost in thought as he looked at his hand, which had a small red orb surrounded by lightning. The kids joyfully hugged and thanked Midoriya for helping their dad. After returning from Naboo Island, classes resumed as usual. Aside from the successful and restful time they spent there, the media had heard about the incident and commended Midoriya for handling it without interfering with the lives of the townspeople. Although the actual fight was not captured on camera, the HPSC released reports to correct the public record. Midoriya was now in Nezu's office, sitting by the coffee table with a cup of tea, while Nezu, All Might, Night Eye, and Gran Torino considered what Midoriya had told them. Are you looking to give anything away for free? Why? Would you like to see another Shigaraki? Sasaki, yes and no. I meant it when I told All Might that no one should bear the weight of peace by themselves. However, you'll be here for a while. To protect the world, you could even create clones of the heroes of today and yourself. Even though it is true, I will still be responsible for them all. I would be the only one in charge of global security. I don't want to ruin so many people's aspirations. If I am the only one who opposes evil, progress will stall even more. Simply phoning invincible would fix any issue. It will put a stop to advancement. Who, in your opinion, ought to receive everything for one? On Katsuma, Naboo Island, there was a child. He can speed up healing by activating the cells in his own and other people's bodies thanks to his peculiarity. Whoever gets the quirk will have to endure some discomfort from either their own quirk altering their body or my utilizing overhaul to keep them alive long enough for that to occur. 9 was highly changed when I first met him, and he had a weaker version of All for One. What about Melissa? She would adore the opportunity to learn more about the peculiarity. I could give it to her, but she must agree to the procedure and be made aware of its risks. I'll continue searching for possible candidates in the interim. The gang accepted the proposal, but Nezu insisted that he be notified beforehand so that he could do a background check. However, they had other things planned for today. All Might, I believe I've figured out how to rewind and rebuild you to your best self. Do you still wish to hold the top spot for a little while longer? Your embers are nearly extinguished. I would want nothing more, Midoriya. Before taking any action, we should get to Recovery Girl. If she weren't there to keep an eye on your vitals, she would definitely have a tantrum. The procedure went well, bringing All Might back to his prime, but that was not the case for the embers. His time limit was extended from 1 hour 40 to 3 hours, and he was given a new medium form called Some Might instead of his old small form. After confirming his new limits, he attempted to run outside to perform some hero work, but Gran Torino and Recovery Girl grabbed him by the ear. After they sat down, Recovery Girl explained his new routine, which included monitoring him for a few days and keeping him on a strict diet because he hadn't been able to eat much without his stomach. The interview between Bakugo and Todoroki, which had been conducted in the dorms earlier in the month, was a disaster. Only recordings of Todoroki made it to air, and Bakugo was taken out of the broadcast entirely because of his violent language. Todoroki was shown, but he was not interview material, only responding to each question with a single word. The class laughed heartily at their expense, with Bakugo digging his grave deeper and Todoroki perplexed as to why his behavior was strange. When Mount Lady and Midnight entered the classroom the following day, everyone was eager for their afternoon instruction to begin. I'm sure you all know who this is, students. Her name is Mount Lady, and Midnight will support her. Together, they will help you be ready for how you will appear to the public and media. Hey everyone, I'll be your guide to creating a positive public image, like Aizawa stated. Come with me. Mount Lady guided the class to a field with a TV showing the interview stage, cameras, and other equipment. I'll interview every one of you, and we'll evaluate how well you performed. Since you have experience in the media, Midoriya, you will go first to demonstrate how a typical interview should proceed. Midoriya smiles softly as she approaches the stage. So, who are you? Adorable. The class was a little taken aback. Did Mount Lady think this was a typical interview? Midoriya chose to participate in the roleplay, narrowing his eyes a little. Some of the females were a little taken aback by the abrupt shift in his demeanor. I'm the unstoppable hero. Invincible, and my quirk is reactionary mutation, among others. Others? Oh, you're referring to your other skills? A lot of conjecture has been generated regarding my skills during the All for One defeat. I've learned a lot about my oddity, but the truth is too lengthy for this kind of interview. Oh, you make fun of me. Do you have anything exceptional to show us? After a brief pause for thought, Midoriya's hand shapes into a cube, which he then cuts off and kneels into the air, flicking into a warp gate as it falls. Ami Drive. Inspired by One Punch Man and Sleep_Deprived Guy. A red-hot piece of metal falls onto his newly regenerated hand, causing air blasts to shoot through it in all directions. The metal cooled and took on a different shape than the jagged metal everyone had anticipated, and a statue of Mount Lady was sitting in his hand, depicting her diving kicking a giant shark villain in her debut scene. As the figurine cooled further from the head sink, ice formed around it, and Midoriya handed it to Mount Lady, who carefully took it and examined it. Thank you. Don't mention it. Mount Lady shook her hands to clear her mind, and Midnight's coughing rapidly disrupted the rosy aura that had suddenly arisen around them. He is still enrolled in school, so what are you doing? Mount Lady straightens her hair. I appreciate the figure, Midoriya. Usually, I get things for other reasons. Who wants to go next, then? The rest of the class went much better. Each student had their flaws but weren't irredeemable, and some had their own charm, which couldn't be said for Todoroki and Bakugo, who were advised to follow Aizawa's example and completely avoid the media. After Midoriya returned to the class, Kaminari asked if Midoriya could make him a figurine of himself. Midoriya agreed, and Kaminari eagerly accepted the figure. Minata, of course, was biting his fist in jealousy. As the work-studies program at UA resumes in a few days, many students choose to return to their former mentors. Bakugo and Todoroki have gone together to work with. They must have been close during the remedial courses. Midoriya was deciding who to turn to when he had an idea. Endeavor, shockingly enough. Perhaps I should visit a certain rabbit. Maruko landed in front of Midoriya, who had just stepped off the train. Someone's excited to see me. Oh, stop talking, you. I'm glad you can still recall who brought you to this point. They were sent to the same clearing where they had practiced the previous time when a warp gate opened beneath them. Maruko looked about in confusion, but she recognized the location and gave Midoriya a cheeky grin. So, who is thrilled about this once more? What sort of man makes a woman wait? Kid, you're not yet a man. Hurry up. They fought in the forest for the next few hours. When Maruko wanted to fight Midoriya while he was using his quirks, he complied. He used some of his more unusual offensive skills, firing at her with an impure beam from his many arms, fire from a mouthful and chimera combination, lighting controlled by Zeus, slice sent exploding hairs, and iron underground that was pulled above and molded into blades that shot at her. Maruko dodged between the trees to avoid the projectiles and guided them into the trees. Midoriya took the hit first, followed by a yellow barrier, an air cannon, steel skin, spikes, fire, ice, smoke, green constructs, and bony ribs. Maruko was pushed back by an attack and was barely standing when Midoriya stopped the attacks and caught her as her legs buckled, putting her arm around his shoulder while she continued to look down as he supported her. Every time Maruko saw an opening, she attempted to take advantage of it, but it was blocked by a different ability. Hey, how are you? With her eyes barely open and a weary expression on her face, she grabbed Midoriya's collar and pulled him into a kiss. Midoriya blushed and recoiled, but Maruko held on, wondering why a hero would kiss him so suddenly and why preemptive warning hadn't alerted him to it. He didn't have time to think as he instinctively kissed him back. Midoriya was again surprised as the heroine pulled away, licking her lips, after the deed continued for a few more seconds. Thanks for the workout, hunk. Her eyes expanded as if she had just restarted, and she attempted to speak, but all that came out was a little, "eh." The thoughts of Maruko. Why did I do that? He'll think I'm strange and spooky and... Unconsciously, Maruko rubbed her head against his chest and took in his aroma as she was abruptly drawn into an embrace that silenced her thoughts. Are you certain you want us to be? Am I Rumi? This? Rumi looked up to Midoriya's blushed but serious and concerned face. During the last internship, there had been brief moments of connection, quick glances between the two of them. She had thought he was the one who was pining for her, but she had found herself missing having him around, smiling when she saw a picture of him, and was so happy to hear that he wanted to work with her. Perhaps this dating thing wouldn't be so bad. I do. Unbeknownst to them, an elderly hiker heard the explosions from Slice and was on the mountain, looking down at the destruction caused by Midoriya's quirk. He used his binoculars to look down and saw Maruko kissing Midoriya. Seeing that they were sharing a private moment, he turned away and hiked down the mountain, knowing that he would not be able to see any of the birds now that the noise had driven them away. Ought to be young again. Rumi calmed down after their moment together, and they went on patrol. It was a little awkward at first, but Maruko quickly got back into the swing of things when a villain appeared. In a convenience store, a man pointed at a clerk with metal tubes at the tips of his fingers, who was moving as slowly as he could to buy time for someone to come to his aid. The robber was on his back with his head being stepped on by Maruko, and when Invincible opened a portal beside him, Maruko dived through and kicked him. The robber's finger fired when he was kicked, but Invincible caught the bullet before it could touch the clerk's cheek. The robber attempted to move his arms, but they were bound to the ground by green structures. The police quickly arrived and took the villain into custody. The remainder of the day proceeded in a similar manner, but incidents subsided once word spread that Invincible was in town, which annoyed Maruko a little because she still had some energy to expend. Deciding that there weren't enough criminals worth leaving, the two of them decided to go to her apartment. Returning to Rumi's apartment, she asks Izuku to wait outside for a moment. He hears cardboard, plastic, and doors slamming, and as he waits, he looks down from the walkway towards the road. Some people notice the movement and wave at him, so he waved back, but as they pulled out their phones, he opened a warp gate in front of him and ducked down. The passers-by looked back up to see the gate went away, and he was about to get up when Rumi opened the door. Was it too long for me? No, not at all. While I was waiting, I was noticed by a few folks. Fortunately, they were spared a photo. Well, come in before someone else sees you. Everything was tidy when I walked into the apartment, avoiding the well-known boxes in the corner. I've been here before, you know. I don't need you to do all of that for me. Anyway, I was meant to clean today. I didn't mean it at all. After turning off his hero costume and unwrapping it into a bracelet around his wrist, Izuku walked to the couch and sat down, taking off his shoes and placing them on the shoe rack. When he turned on the TV, a news channel was talking about Detnirot, a company that makes lifestyle support gear and has been making progress in the hero support gear market. The news anchors talked about the topic for a little while before going on to the next one. Rumi, who was now dressed in a white shirt and sweatpants, handed Izuku a glass of water and sat down. They sat on the couch for a while, channel surfing for something to watch, and eventually they found a channel that featured reruns of movies from the pre-Quark era. It was playing the end credits of a movie they had missed, and when they pressed the menu button, it showed the next movies that were coming up, which were from the early 2000s, more than a century ago. Choosing to leave it on that channel, Izuku went to the kitchen to prepare some dinner. A few pieces of prepackaged meat and fish were in the freezer, and he took some ingredients out and decided to make a carrot stew with rice. As he walked back into the living room, he noticed a man on TV getting gas for his car, and a punkish kid approached him smoking a cigarette. When he opened the refrigerator, he found it nearly full of carrots stacked neatly in a half-eaten carrot cake. Nice car. Thanks. As the stew simmered, Izuku sat down and Rumi caught him up on what he had missed. Izuku kept an eye on the film several times by sticking his head through a warp gate, and Rumi seemed to enjoy the action scenes, particularly the ones where the main character went on a mission to get justice for the last gift his wife had given him. The film ended with the man having just stapled his stab wound in the back of an animal clinic, and he opened the cage and took the dog with him. Let's go home. The credits rolled as Izuku checked on the stew, and the film ended with the man walking by the riverbed with the dog on a leash. The same riverside where Rumi saw his wife collapse. Food's ready. The next movie began with a small house in a field near a small river with a stone bridge, and as the camera zoomed into the house in front of the window, the narration spoke about the world and which country has the best food. France was declared, specifically in Paris, and then they described a chef and his fame. The narrator disagreed with his motto, anyone can cook. Izuku completely warped into the kitchen and prepared both of their dinners. Rumi then got some cushions and set them next to the coffee table. They take cooking seriously, so he should know that no one could cook. A rat with a book leaps out of the window. This is me. While eating, Izuku and Rumi watched an animated film about a rat who meets a janitor in Paris and helps him cook by pulling on his hair. It was a funny movie to watch because it made them hungry, so they had a few extra helpings. After the film ended, Izuku used telekinesis to move the dirty dishes to the sink and wash them while he was still sitting on the couch. After watching movies together for the remainder of the night, Rumi slowly laid onto Izuku, who wrapped his arms around her, and eventually they both fell asleep, with Rumi on top of him, embracing him like a body pillow. When Izuku awoke, she found Rumi cradling him while he slept soundly, and her ears perked up when his breathing altered. Oh my god, what will my mother think now that we're dating? As he gently stroked her smooth white hair, he concluded that he would handle the conversation in the future. Rumi embraced him more tightly, pressing her face against his chest, and he glanced at the wall clock, which showed that it was 5 in the morning, the time he typically woke up. Rumi gradually woke up, pulling herself away from him and sitting on his lap while stretching and rubbing her eyes. Yawn. I haven't slept that good in a while. Stunned by their posture, she looked down and saw that she was sitting on her boyfriend's lap, straddling him. Morning, Rumi. Izuku pulled away, delighted by the cute blushing mess in front of him, and sat up now, face to face, with her on his lap and his hands around her waist as he kissed her. Let's prepare, please. We have people to protect and a task to do. After Rumi calmed down, they proceeded to get dressed, and Izuku wrapped himself up in his room to give her some solitude. They decided to meet again at 9 a.m. after warping back. Izuku showered and went for a run, and when he returned to his dorm, he received a call from the president of HPSC. Morning, Prez. Good morning, Midoriya, to you as well. We need you to do something. You're going to meet Rikiya Yatsubashi, the president and CEO of Detnirot. So, how did he come to your attention? A small increase in villain support gear has been seen by our operatives. When the villain is rendered unconscious, they blow up, despite our best efforts to recover them. Todoroki and Bakugo, 2 of your classmates, recently came into a villain who was using these gadgets. The truth? All right, I will do it. What time is the meeting? The time has been fixed by our liaison for this afternoon at 2 p.m. and he is meeting you at their headquarters in Deka City since they think you and he have similar interests. The truth? which tells me you know what their alter ego is. Indeed, we believe he is a member of the Metalibaration Army, which espouses the belief that everyone's peculiarities should be accepted, even in public. I hope you realize what a catastrophe that would be. The truth, of course I do. Even if you were born with peculiarities, any quirk might cause some harm if it is used inappropriately. All right. I hope you can get him to give you something tangible. Goodbye. Bye, Madam Prez. After the president hung up, Izuku checked the time and saw that it was 6:47 a.m., so he investigated the Yatsubashi family. It started with a woman known as the Mother of Quirks, who was the one who came up with the term quirk to describe the powers people acquired. Her son, Chikara Yatsubashi, was a quirk activist who pushed for the repeal of laws that restricted quirks. At the time, many quirked people viewed him as the voice of the minority and supported his campaign. His protests are now viewed as acts of terrorism wrapped in pretentious and deceptive language, which led to his manifesto, Meta Liberation War, which is banned in Japan, though some copies appear to have appeared here and there in the hands of villains. Izuku then turns to Rikiya Yatsubashi, the current owner of Detenirot, a company that supports the public's way of life and is now entering the hero industry. We don't know much about him, but he appears to have a spotless record for a businessman. When Izuku returned to Rumi's apartment at 9 in the morning, she was eating a carrot while relaxing on the couch. He informed her that he had a meeting with the CEO of Detenirot, and although she was a little let down that they couldn't spend more time together, she understood. When they returned to the clearing, the wasteland was still in ruins. Izuku pulled Rumi up a little and put his hand on the ground, causing a horn to grow from his forehead as he pressed rewind. The forest appeared to be a reversing video, with debris rising from the ground and returning to its proper position. Izuku stopped when he noticed some of the leaves retracting back into branches, and he let Rumi down as she gazed at the restored forest in front of her. What? Was that a peculiarity? Yes, it's called rewind, and you can see how it works. I got it in exchange for the little girl that Overhaul had imprisoned. However, I've never attempted it on an entire forest. You gave her what? The wings of a dragon. I offered her a list of safe quirks to employ, and she decided on that as she could defend herself and flee if she got into problems. A bright youngster. One day, she will be a great hero. That's her decision to make if she wants to be a hero. In order to avoid exhausting her too much before the patrol, Izuku decided to spare her using only his physical abilities, as they had done during their first spar. Izuku matched Rumi blow for blow, making it appear to onlookers that Maruko was fighting a doppelganger. Gradually, Izuku began to modify some of his moves to be more grounded to match his usual fighting style, which made Rumi put more power into her strikes because he was now moving much less and not dodging. They were now exchanging blows, but Rumi was growing slower and slower, so Izuku matched her. They stopped at around 11 a.m. to go on their patrol, and since it was still quite early, they decided to have brunch. They entered a cafe, ordered drinks and some snacks, and sat down to wait for their order when a man in a hoodie reached his hand over the counter on the cash register with the barista's back to them. Rumi also saw this and motioned to Izuku to take care of it. The barista turned back to see Midoriya holding the newly arrived customer as he walked up behind him and put his arm around his shoulder. The man froze in place and slowly withdrew his hand from the cash register. What appears to be wrong, sir? Oh, nothing. All I did was recognize a friend, isn't that correct? Why yeah, he just caught me by surprise is all. Oh, all right. Well, your order is prepared, sir. Thanks. The thief recognized Maruko and chose to cut his losses after Midoriya levitated their order to his table, not so gently dragging him along. He then sat down, placed the thief on a chair next to them, and tied him to the chair with an energy construct. Look, I'm sorry, okay, just let me return the money and you never see me again. The truth? You were very kind, but why did you steal in the first place? I just needed some extra cash, man. The truth. For what purpose? Listen, I have a lot of debt that I must repay, please let me go. The truth? Unfortunately, loan sharks aren't exactly legal, so you're not going anywhere until we get them. Now, precisely where can we locate them? The man was guiding Invincible and Maruko to his regular meeting spot with his lender. His name was Tamagiri, and he needed the money to settle his obligations and the debt he inherited from his uncle so he could keep working to pay it off. However, they amended the agreement, leaving him with no other option. He received the funds with a 30% interest rate from Agatsugi Finance. On a rooftop, Maruko and Invincible waited for their shark to pass by. That proved to be rather literal, as a big man wearing a shark's head approached Tamagiri directly. Hey kid, you got the money? Why yes. Before attempting to rob the cafe, the man took out the little cash he had received. After examining the money, the shark snatched it from his grasp and hurled it in his face with rage. You really think that was enough? The boss will have your head for this. The truth? We graciously let you borrow what you needed and you repay us like this. Maruko leapt down between them, confronting the sharkman, just as the shark was ready to punch down on Tamagiri, but his arm was bound by green bands. Hold on, fishy. I don't think extortion is exactly legal now, is it? The shark fights the bands in an attempt to break free. Invincible landed silently while flying down swiftly. I don't think Fishy has the brain capacity to answer. Now, where is your office? Forced by confession, he says that the loan shark's primary office was close by and concealed as an izakaya. The criminal's hands were in front of him as Invincible moved the bands, and he seized them. Sleep. The offender grew slack, breathing softly, and stopped trying against the shackles. He restrains the shark and fastens him to the ground by removing metal from the surrounding rubbish. He and Maruko headed to the izakaya after telling Tamagiri to remain where he was. In order to avoid disturbing any of the nearby bystanders, Invincible asked Maruko if he could handle this in private. We could also just bust in there to take them in. Yeah, sure, but that would cause a lot of noise and alert any villain that we are in the area. I get not wanting to disturb the public, but isn't alerting villains the whole reason we patrol? If the villains know where we are, then they can pass the information around and the villains far from us will be emboldened to act. Okay, fair, but how are you going to do this quietly? You don't look exactly casual. Do you have a quirk for it? Slowly, Invincible changed into Akatani, dressed in a shabby gakuren. Whistle, so you can pretty much go anywhere. Yeah, it's how I infiltrated the Shi Hasaikai. They were using the little girl to make quirk-destroying drugs. Those bastards. All right, then I'm going to stay outside to stop their reinforcements and prevent the criminals inside from escaping. Sound like a plan, let's go. Akatani used freak sight while walking to the izakaya to search for a group of people who were concealed and had no clear path to reach them. A rough-looking man and the chef cooking were seated at the bar. Akatani sighed as he sat at the bar, exhausted. Hello customer, what will you be having? See, can I just get some water? Sure. Here. To the chef's minor surprise, Akatani takes a large gulp. Would you like another? No. See, can I sit here for a bit? I promise to move if someone wants my seat. No problem at all, young man. Not many people come here for lunch anyway. Akatani closed his eyes and sat for a while. The rough-hewn man said, Hey kid, why are you all the way down here? Shouldn't you be in school? I needed cash. Dad's sick, so I need to come out to do odd jobs so he doesn't need to worry. Damn, look, I meet a lot of people like you around these parts. I have a friend who is willing to let you borrow some money to get you by. He doesn't set time limits even though the interest is pretty high, but I'm sure you can pay that off quickly, you just need to get back up on your feet. The truth? Where is your friend? Hey, follow me. He followed the man to the izakaya's side, where he found a door behind a wooden board. A stairway with a door at the bottom led down through it. Upon entering, one found a tastefully decorated lobby across from the entrance. On the side, some people were playing cards as the news was shown on a TV above them. Hey boss, we have a guest. The door opened to reveal a young man in a sharp suit who looked like a member of the Yakuza. He smiled, dazzling and sly at the same time. Welcome to Agatsugi Finance. How may I be of service to you, mister? M.I. Makumo. Akatani Makumo, sir. I heard you're a lender. Then you've heard correctly. I assume Daru told you about what we could do for you. Come in, there is much to discuss. As he entered the office, the door slammed behind him, leaving the boss and him alone. Where are my manners? My name is Kamaru Agatsugi. I'm the boss of this place. Now, how much do you need? The truth? 400,000 yen. Do you have that? That we do now. You'll need to sign the contract before you can get your money. From the Agatsugi's hand, a puff of flame revealed a contract. With a hint of enthusiasm, he set it in front of Akatani. Deal was the boss's quirk, according to the quirk progenitor. It gave him the ability to call forth contracts at the expense of his life, but whosoever signs them will be gradually sucked. If the signer breaks the contract, they will forfeit half of their remaining life, which will be given to Agatsugi. If Agatsugi breaks the contract, he will quickly lose the equal amount of age. He gets younger and stronger the longer he lives. This guy has been very quiet to avoid the HPSC's notice. According to the contract, he might borrow the desired amount at a 20% interest rate. Whether he could or could not, he was required to repay it. He picks up the pen and lingers over the dotted line while wearing a troubled expression. He puts the pen down on the table after seeming to struggle. The sound of the pen being set aside made the boss's eye twitch. I shouldn't be here. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Akatani stands up to go, but Daru and a few other men stand in his way. Now Mr. Makumo, Daru I'm sure had spent a bit of time to convince you to come down here. We wouldn't want to waste his time now, would we? Akatani's posture gradually shifted as he turned to face the culprits. He used to be timid and crouched in terror, but now he stood up straight, relaxed, and boredom took the place of the fear in his eyes. The boss was left alone in his office after the goons were pushed out by the metal objects in the room that floated slightly and shot at them. The boss attempted to strike Akatani with his brass knuckles. Akatani was on the verge of grabbing the fist when it veered off course and began to shoot for his liver. Akatani was taken aback by this and let the punch land. The room's hardwood coffee table was splintered by the shockwave from the collision. Holding his side, Akatani pretended to be in pain as he moved his body in response to the impact. Not so tough now, or ya. A hand blocks the boss's hook before it can reach Akatani's head, crushing the brass knuckles between Akatani's palm and the boss's fish. The boss took a step back and examined the remnants of his weapon. Not bad. You packed quite a punch and made me go a bit faster. The boss removed the other brass knuckle and slammed Akatani with a barrage of punches that were on par with All Might's speed and strength following the injury, but the boss appeared to be becoming older with each stroke. Akatani decided to stop this before he punched himself into an early death, so he seized both of his hands and gave him a headbutt, which made him back up a few steps and caused blood to trickle out of his nose. Just in front of him, Akatani materialized and took hold of his arm. Stop. A little of the boss's youth returned when his body relaxed. He appeared to be in his late 30s now. He was restrained by metal that exploded from the walls when he was seated on the frayed couch. He let go of him and made an unsuccessful attempt to break free of the metal. Fuck you, brat. When I get out of this you'll wish you had me kill you. Threatening a hero? You're going away for a long time plus the extortion racket you run. What? You ain't no hero, just an overconfident brat. The boss, who now appeared older, was terrified when Akatani's shape changed back to invincible in his hero suit. And, why are you here? I'm supposed to be asking the questions, but sure. I'm here because one of your debtors got desperate. That is all I'm going to say. I'm curious, with that much power why haven't you taken advantage of the power gap left by the defeat of All for One? What kind of idiot would go for the grab now? All Might is still actively hunting down the remnants of those affiliated with that monster. Everyone is waiting for him to completely retire to make their move. The long game. Smart, but you mentioned everyone. Who else is with your little clique? Under the effect of confession, the boss started blurting out names indiscriminately, and Invincible recorded it on his phone. He halted after a few minutes, gasping for air from the strain of hanging his head. Invincible took hold of his hand once more. Mr. Agatsugi, it was a pleasure to speak with you. Your friends will be thrilled to meet me. Sleep. Acquired deal. Elevated potency. Cell longevity. As his peculiarity is removed, the boss doesn't age. Invincible uses telekinesis to pick him up and transport him outside, where he finds Maruko browsing via her phone while standing atop a heap of unconscious bodies. It was about time you arrived. Why did it take you so long? We talked for a while because the boss was really fascinating. While you were waiting, did anyone rush out? A few did, but it seems this is everyone. While Maruko told the police about the pickup, Invincible tossed the unconscious people into the pile. He glances down at his phone and notices that it is 1:34 p.m., then turns to face Maruko. Maruko, I got to go the meeting. All right, good luck. Just as she was talking to Hawks, a green warp gate opened into Madam President's office. Sorry for the intrusion. Miroria, don't worry about it. Why have you come to my office? Just wanted to know if you had arranged someone to take me to Detnirot headquarters. We didn't. Do you require escort services? No, I was simply curious so I wouldn't waste your money. Hawks, have a nice day, madam. They both watch as Midoriya disappears as swiftly as he comes. Prez, is he employed by you? He is contracted, but the terms were slightly in his favor. Oh. Nezu truly let you down. The president gave Hawks a severe look. Sorry, ma'am. Arriving where Detnirot was, Midoriya notices a big office building with a few office workers passing by. The onlookers were a little taken aback to find Invincible Warp next to an office building, so an assistant comes out to welcome him. Mr. Yatsubashi is waiting for you in his office. Invincible, welcome to Detnirot. Follow me, please. Yatsubashi was standing by the window, looking out, and he turned to face his guest as they entered an elevator, and after she scanned a card, they were taken to the second to top floor, where they found a spacious office with elegant wooden tables and leather chairs overlooking Deka City. Ah, Invincible, so great to have you here. He is approached by Invincible, who gives him a firm but gentle handshake. Adapted heart attack resistance. Yatsubashi, I have all the pleasure. I've heard about your ideas a lot. Yatsubashi's eyes tense up a bit. I've always intended to grow my company by entering the hero market. Heroes everywhere will now require our assistance as All Might's retirement draws near. That they do. Yatsubashi turns to face the helper. Pardon us. Invincible and I have a lot to talk about. Actually, take the remainder of the day off. Oh, thank you, sir. Yatsubashi bowed slightly and pointed to the leather couches as the assistant returned to the elevator and departed. Please have a seat. There are perfectly good spots to sit, therefore it is impossible to have guests standing around. Yatsubashi sits across from Invincible on the leather couch, and Yatsubashi speaks first. Again, I am happy you decided to visit, but I'm wondering what influenced the decision. My associate has told me a lot about you and there is something I want to know for myself. All right, ask away. I would be more than pleased to address any questions you may have. I was wondering if you are familiar with your ancestor Chikara Yatsubashi. Yes, his activism is something I am aware of. How do you feel about his message? He has a lot of excellent points at this stage in his life. Since the beginning of oddities, the people still feared them, and the laws governing them had not been altered. He had the admirable objective of normalizing the quirked folks. I also hold that belief. Unfortunately, a lot of individuals have suffered because they are unable to defend themselves with their full might. As he talks, a tear falls from his eye. Every civilian must now wait for a hero to intervene. They are now comfortable. You've probably noticed. They will congregate to watch and marvel at the show whenever there is a major villain battle, putting themselves in risk in the process. Well, I don't really hold them responsible. They completely rely on heroes to protect them, but as you may know, I deal with enemies in a covert and unseen manner. Civilians don't have to put themselves in danger. After what transpired in Osaka, close to Night Eye's agency, I assumed you simply disliked crowds. I wish more heroes outside of the undergrounds did it your way. Every time a villain strikes, it has an impact on businesses around the city. Spocking business, tell me how you rose to the position of CEO here. I've read that this is your first significant public appearance. I spent a couple years working here. I had become a protege of my former boss because he liked me. I studied under him for a few years, and then he gave me the keys to his kingdom. I'm thankful he gave me a chance, but I'm not sure what about me caught his eye. Oh, is that correct? He might just have a knack for people, I suppose. If it's okay with you, may I inquire if you've advanced your hero technology? There isn't I can reveal as of now, but there are a few items that will be coming out soon for our debut. For the next hour or so, they talked about their lives together, and when the hour came to a conclusion, Yatsubashi went to his bookcase and took out a book called Meta Liberation War. I'm sure you've heard of this book. As he responds, Invincible casually flips through the book he took from him. I have, indeed. I wanted a copy so I could learn more about Destro and his principles. His manifesto, which only mentions its name and general premise, is surprisingly unrecorded on the internet. I'll give you this copy if you want. Although you have the option to return it, I'm confident that its message will captivate you, my buddy. A voice spoke as the phone on his desk began to ring. Sir, you have your 4 o'clock coming up. Oh, I nearly forgot. I appreciate you reminding me. I'll come down right now. The call ended when the phone beeped. I'm sorry, when you're around nice people, time goes by quickly. Yatsubashi, no issue. I have no doubt that we will cross paths shortly. A shade of black comes on Invincible's face as he opens a green warp gate and warps away, leaving Yatsubashi alone in his office. He puts his trembling hands in prayer and lets out the breath he had been holding the entire time he showed him the book. I must tell the others. I thank whatever God is for giving him similar ideals. After wiping the perspiration from his brow with a handkerchief, he left for his staff meeting. He warped back into Miruko's apartment, which was deserted, and used Quirk Sight to scan the area. He discovered her in the city, frantically pursuing something, so he warped above to gain a clear view of the situation. The car was making sharp turns to try to avoid Miruko, who was jumping across buildings to catch them. Miruko appeared to be growing irritated as the car kept swerving away from her, so Invincible chose to stay out of the way and used Energy Construct to pull civilians into safety. Then, without hearing the ensuing crash, The civilians closed their eyes and screamed as the speeders struck a corner too hard, causing the car to flip and crash into a storefront. When they opened their eyes, they saw the car floating upside down in midair, with the speeders lying awkwardly on the roof. The car slowly rotated and was gently placed on the ground, and the speeders slowly got out of it, falling to their knees and breathing heavily. Maruko landed close by and picked them up by their collar, and Invincible floated down. "Looks like you were busy. I took care of it. How went the meeting?" "Everything went smoothly. What are you two up to, then?" The speeder gave an unthinking response: "Bank robbery." He made a hasty attempt to conceal his mouth, but it was unsuccessful. "Very cliché. We should take them to the cops. The bank is where?" "Back a few of blocks. People will be forced to collect the money." They dropped the villains off at the station, and Maruko had to stay and make the report. In the meantime, Invincible decided to go shopping and restock Miruko's fridge, and by the time he finished, Maruko was waiting at the station. Maruko then told him where the bank was, so he warped the car to their entrance. "Hey, how long did you wait?" "No, not at all. Let's head home." They open a warp gate and head home. After changing, Rumi went outside to find Izuku reading a book on the couch. The book's title was The Meta-Liberation War, and the HPSC typically places people on a watch list if they are caught in possession of it. Rumi took a seat next to Izuku on the couch. "Where did that come from?" "From Detnerat's CEO. He handed me this book, and we bonded over our conversation." "What sort of fool demonstrates a hero's villainy?" "An idiot that has done it before." "The truth." "All right, enough heroic rhetoric. Let's see if that Hitman movie has a follow-up." Through a warp gate, Invincible reappeared in Madam President's office the following day. "Morning, Prez." "Greetings from Invincible. From Yatsubashi, did you manage to obtain anything?" "Oh, just a little." Invincible threw the manifesto on her desk, and a recording was sent to her computer. She appeared to be pretty satisfied, so it appeared that was all the evidence she needed. "Well done, Invincible. If we need your experience, we'll get in touch." With a nod, Invincible walked silently into a warp gate. Izuku continued to pursue the loan shark he had obtained from Agatsugi, who was a highly connected man who had a hand in many underworld operations. He was currently hunting down an informant and broker under the alias of Jiren, and he had asked Shimura if they had contact with him. It turned out that almost everyone who joined him had been scouted, and Bubaigarawa was a man who was fairly close to him. They had his phone number, but stated that it was probably deactivated following the fall of all of one and their disappearance. Jiren approached two men who were hanging around chatting, and Invincible followed him as he went to meet with some clients. "Hi gentlemen, what assistance do you need from me?" "Jiren, good to see you. We need to know how Invincible is moving. He has been a real annoyance lately, but as you are aware, it is hard to pinpoint his precise location. You will have to pay for this." Jiren examines a brown envelope stuffed full of cash that one of the two men has pulled out and looks at the amount. "I appreciate your business. Right now, he ought to be right here." The two men had Invincible's arms around their shoulders now. "Sleep." The two guys pass out apart, allowing Invincible to move between them in the direction of Jiren, who was retreating in terror. "Jiren, you are a difficult man to track down. It was very kind of you to show up. I'm Invincible. I apologize for being difficult to locate. In relation to that, how did you discover me?" "This other guy told me about you after I knew another guy who knew another guy. You can acquire anything from this dude, for a cost." "All right. What do you want now that you have me?" "This." After using dominance to seize Jiren's head, Invincible let go of him as Jiren dropped to his knees. Jiren attempted to move the hand away from his face, but it remained in place, and a blue light flashed on his face. He tried to scream, but his mouth was open and silent. "Who are you serving? You sire, O eternal barrel. Why am I getting new titles because of this quirk? Are you aware that the support equipment is showing up on the illegal market?" "Unfortunately not much, but I do know the suppliers frequent Deka City." "The truth? Detnerod is the distributor of exploding villain support gear." "The truth? Detnerod has sole control of Deka City." "Fiction? Detnerod is working alone." "Fiction. All right, that's verified now. Please gather information about Detnerod and their associates, Jiren." "As you command, sire." Invincible turned and disappeared, leaving Jiren by himself in the alleyway. It then reappeared on the rooftop, gazing down at Jiren as he softly departs. After several days, Jiren contacted him and said he had gathered the information. Warping to his location, Jiren handed him a document containing the information he had gathered. Yatsubashi is a well-connected man who interacts with other leaders of Feel Good Inc., the Hearts and Mind Party, and Shueisha Publishing. After presenting the information to Madam President, she dismissed Midoriya, saying she had a lot of plans. A week goes by before HPSC moves in. Now, a large group of heroes, some of whom were in Class 1A, were gathered on the outskirts of Deka City, along with enough personnel to encircle the city. Invincible, who had a horn on his head, was one of the heroes, but his role in the plan was straightforward. Warp out all of the city's civilians, pull personnel out if they were in danger, and capture all of the defeated villains. It appeared small, so it could be leveled with a single flick. Are you in position, Invincible? Yes. Begin evac. The city's emergency alarm went off, and the members of the Meta Liberation Army rushed out of their homes to defeat the invading heroes. The war was fierce, and chaos ensued throughout the city. Some of the heroes were injured, so Invincible warped them to the sky, healed them using Rewind, and sent them back into the battlefield. Green warp gates appeared all over the city, dragging over 10,000 civilians away and releasing the heroes into the center of the city. After a few minutes, some of the villains noticed something in the air and attempted to get a good look at it, but were thwarted by other combatants. High Command receives reports of an object in the sky, and a black-haired man sitting in a room full of monitors surveys the city. After receiving the reports, he tries to get a visual of the object, but all he needs to confirm who it is a blurry green dot that he can see with a camera. Invincible is in the air, soldiers. Pay attention, don't participate, go back. Tundra sent ice to surround the tower and prevent the heroes from escaping, but as the ice was approaching, it suddenly stopped and reversed, launching itself at the heroes. Before the ice could make contact with them, Endeavor and his agency melted them away. Tundra looked shocked that his attack was repelled and used against him. The atmosphere changed as the army turned tail and ran, causing the heroes to pursue them. Invincible in the air noticed that they weren't just scattering at random trying to hide. As I mentioned at the sporting event, you have to deal with the repercussions. A shroud of ice flew at Tundra, who could have created an ice wall to block the shards, but he didn't want to give the enemy more ammunition. He couldn't just dodge because heroes who couldn't defend themselves from the attack were behind him. Tundra was devastated by this flashback to that fight and his pledge, and as it was happening, a man in a large blue winter coat appeared floating out of the tower as water tanks around the city burst, releasing shards of ice at the heroes. Repercussions. Instead of wasting any more time, Tundra rushed the villain and sent a jet of flame at him. The villain dodged, but his ice platform melted and was much smaller. The other heroes took advantage of the opening and knocked him out, and the villain was warped away and appeared in front of Invincible. Tundra's left side burst into flame, turning the ice shards coming at him directly into steam. The others appeared surprised by the development, believing that Tundra could only produce ice. An ice control quirk that has been awakened. What will happen, I wonder? Taken from Iceply. Synergy of quirks. Ice Giant Ice King, Iceply. Iceply provided. Sleep. After warping him to the containment area, Invincible continued to watch the operation, using quirk sight and weaknesses detection to see where the heroes and villains were. The fighting was intense, with both sides taking damage, but the villains were gradually driven back. Eventually, the heroes reached the top floor, where Rikia Yatsubashi, also known as Redestro, was standing by the glass window overlooking a smoldering city. He looked up to see Invincible floating above it all like a deity, a role he had desired since assuming the mantle of his late ancestor. The skin around his eyes darkens as he turns to face the heroes. It is great to see you all here. Can it with the Theatrix villain your reign ends here? Oh, I wouldn't be too sure about that. He touched a button on his suit cuff. When hundreds and thousands of Nomu appeared in the city and started destroying the buildings, the entire area was covered in dark sludge. A mountainous man was heard rumbling near the city's outskirts, charging straight at it through the forest. Invincible, sensing the chaos, used radio waves to stop the thousands of Nomu in their tracks, along with the giant man who stopped roughly before entering the city. Every Nomu stops and turns to face Invincible in the air. Bring me the doctor. As the doctor tries to escape, Invincible conjures up a green construct floor for the Nomu to step on and clings to his face as one of the Nomu warps away and back with him. Fancy meeting you here, Doctor. Midoriya Ho. As the doctor tries to scream, a blue radiance emanates from Invincible's palm, dimming the doctor, who is now gazing at Invincible with awe. Who are you serving? You, Master, the one that is not singular. Have you sent the last of the Nomu here? No, there are still many in reserve. The top of the watchtower is blown away abruptly, revealing a blackened and enlarged Re-Destro who is swinging his arms wildly, batting away the heroes, including Maruko. Re-Destro looked back up at Invincible in the sky, which caused his stress to skyrocket and make him larger. The defeated heroes and the now loyal Doctor were distorted away as Invincible slowly floated down to the remaining heroes' battle with Re-Destro. Together, we had the power to transform this world. Invincible, do you not think that people ought to be able to live freely? Although your emancipation would have made it clear that only the powerful should be entitled to peace, I did agree that the law should be changed. If quirks are allowed to be employed freely, people with mind-altering quirks would be in control. The capacity to influence people's thoughts. No one could oppose quirk cancelers because they were so rare. And that doesn't even include kids who lack self-control. Re-Destro, in anger and grief, ignores the other heroes and swings at Invincible, but the blow instantly stops as soon as it hits Invincible, and the outcome remains the same. To the surrounding heroes, who backed off, it appeared as though a rag doll was being puppeted to strike a wall, completely ineffectively. After a few minutes, Re-Destro shrinks back to his normal form because his body can no longer withstand the stress placed on it, and he now sits on his legs, kneeling on the ground, with a bored expression on his face, the sun behind him darkening his features but not hiding his piercing green eyes. What do you all have to wait for? He lacks the desire to fight anymore. When Invincible looked out to the city, he saw the huge man staring at him with tears that threatened to spill out, and the 100,000 Nomu still staring at him. The heroes who were watching swiftly stood up and arrested the villain who did not resist. Master? Invincible flies in the direction of the enormous man? If you're talking about All for One, then he's in prison. The big radio around his neck switched on, and All for One's voice came out. The man was a little stunned to learn that his master had been captured, but he quickly became enraged and began to grow and moan. Gigantomachia, calm down. The doctor's voice suddenly sounded from the radio, and the man instantly obeys the command, shrinking down to his usual height. The guy in front of you defeated your former master, Gigantomachia, All for One. Their altercation was captured on camera and aired for public viewing. He only needed one punch to defeat him. However, what makes him deserving of taking master's place? That's for you to decide. Invincible raised his arm to receive the blow, and to the hero's surprise, it landed with a quiet thud as if Invincible had just petted the giant man. Gigantomachia looked at Invincible floating in front of him and pulled his arm back after reading a strike. He then punched, using all of his strength and devotion to his master. Gigantomachia kneels down on one knee with this fist pressed on the floor. Master, please pardon Gigantomachia for hitting you. I forgive you. How else would you know that I was worthy, after all? I'm grateful, Master. What's your name? My hero name is Invincible, and my name is Izuku Midoriya. Would you please shrink? Your size is making the other heroes here a little uneasy. Of course. In order to avoid feeling singled out, Invincible uses his own gigantification quirk to match his size, which makes Gigantomachia feel touched. Gigantomachia shrinks to about 10 meters in size. He was still a large person, but not so much that we couldn't build a home for him. The heroes in the area looked at him suspiciously, and he did the same, remaining alert of the eyes on him. That was never done by All for One. Is he friendly or invincible? He is. What did you do for All for One when you worked for him, by the way? I was his bodyguard and now I am yours. A bodyguard was necessary for a monster like him? It was my pledge when he saved me. I don't need a bodyguard. So what am I supposed to do, Master? I'll come up with something. The remaining heroes followed Invincible to the gathering spot on a cliff overlooking the city, and after it was confirmed that everyone was there, Invincible warped back to the city as a horn grew on his head. He placed his hand on the ground and sent a golden pulse into the debris of the destroyed city, and the people on the cliff watched in amazement as the city rewound each of their attacks in reverse. After a few minutes, the city was returned to its pre-war state, and some even recorded the event on camera. Gigantomachia, gazing at the restored city, felt a tear fall down his cheek. Master is really powerful. The following days were a media frenzy as footage of the war was leaked to the public. Skeptic, one of the Meta Liberation Army commanders, had recorded the war and planned for its release a few hours later. The public watched the war from front to back from a variety of angles, and they edited the footage to better understand its scope. The public was terrified to see an entire city under the cover of an extremist group. Were their own cities under such control? Some heroes were also involved in that group's public actions, which heightened their fear. The affiliated groups were disbanded and their supporters were investigated. The HPSC conducted thorough audits on all heroes, starting from the top 10, in response to public outcry that they could no longer trust that a hero saving the day wasn't associated with villains. The public was somewhat calmed, but their trust in heroes was diminished, and a new sentiment emerged. The HPSC responded that Invincible was best suited for that role because he could pull allies out of danger, heal them, and keep them in the fight, as evidenced by the fact that all parties involved were in good health after the assault. They continued by saying that Invincible was authorized to step in if the assault team faced a threat too big for them to handle. This was the reason why they had relegated him to a purely supporting role and not included him in the main assault team from the start. The government had to intervene to sort out building ownership and establish a governing body to run the city because the city, which had once housed over 100,000 people, was now populated by slightly over 10,000 people who had been evacuated at the beginning of the war. The fact that the city was largely undamaged attracted many people who wanted to move in and purchase the property that had once belonged to the extremists. Izuku was now standing on a walkway in a warehouse, looking over the Nomu that were now under his control. He had given the doctor instructions to reverse the experiments that had been done to them, but he told him that he had not yet found a way to do so, not that he had tried to do so before. After hearing this, Izuku conferred with Nezu to decide what to do with the thousands of creatures, and he suggested that they gather scientists to try and reverse the effect. Nezu began calling people, and soon a large number of doctors, scientists, and researchers arrived, many of whom wanted to help reverse the process, while others wanted to know how the process was carried out. The HPSC even sent some of their own people, but they were promptly turned away. It would take some time before they would receive anything, so they had to make a place to store the Nomu. Gigantomachia was a different problem because he couldn't fit in any of the buildings and preferred to live outside. Nezu offered to build him a house, but he refused, stating that he could just live in the nearby mountains. Gigantomachia was perplexed because he had been living underground in the mountains for many years, buried in the dirt. Izuku objected, saying that he should at least have a house, but Gigantomachia refused, stating that he didn't need to do so. Nezu allowed him to use the forest's trees because it was still Ua land. Izuku grew to Gigantomachia's size and began removing appropriate trees from the ground and shaping them with energy construct tools. When he was finished, Gigantomachia was so overcome with emotion that he turned around and gave Izuku a hug as he stared at the house with tears in his eyes and carefully inspected the new house his master had constructed, being cautious not to break anything. "I'm grateful, Master." As the enormous man sobbed in thanks on Izuku's chest, Izuku quietly patted his back in a little awkward way. After a few minutes, he calmed down and apologized for getting Izuku's clothes muddy, but he assured him it was okay. Gigantomachia tapped Izuku's shoulder just before he left. "Now that Master is not in need of my protection, what does Gigantomachia do?" "You. Keep the school safe. The holy protector concealed in the mountains will be you. I won't disappoint you." As he grew a little, Gigantomachia appeared to enjoy his next objective. Izuku said goodbye to him and went back to the dorms, where he saw everyone in the living room while the TV was on the news discussing the war. After analyzing his own and the HPSC's actions, the news turned to the other heroes who were involved in the conflict, discussing the recent developments of Tundra, who used fire like his father. Some speculated that he was hiding the ability as a trump card, while others suggested that Invincible had given him a fire quirk to give him an advantage and eliminate his weakness from being frostbitten. Izuku was intrigued by the idea of disclosing some of his quirks. Momo saw him enter through the front door. "Hey, welcome back, Midoriya. You were where?" Some of them turned back to listen to his response to her question. "Up in the highlands, I was settling the enormous man, Gigantomachia. He will be on guard in case someone with malicious intent tries to enter. As if we need some lackey from All for None to protect us. Still doesn't hurt to have an extra set of eyes, Bakugo. So he's with us?" "Effectively yes, though he only answers to me, Nezu or the doctor." "In fact, why haven't we heard of him and what did he do for All for One?" "He was his bodyguard during his prime. Need a bodyguard for a guy like All for One?" "He needed someone to look out for him because he wasn't always strong and didn't appreciate intricate idiosyncrasies. He wasn't always the underworld's ruler. So he will simply remain in the forest?" "Yes, for as long as possible, even if you might see him shortly." Some of them shuddered at the thought. What is in store for Midoriya? The last few months had been busy and action-packed, but now that the threats had been eliminated, Class 1A returned to Ua to continue their education. At least that was what they wanted, but Nezu decided they had enough experience to skip the first year's physical education and go straight to the second-year material because, although they theoretically had a lot to learn, Their fighting prowess and skills were far superior to those of the other first years. Aizawa was now explaining today's practice while the class was in the pretend city. Today's training is a battle simulation in which you will have to contend with Midoriya-made villain clones that are concealed throughout the city. It's your responsibility to track him out, apprehend him, and free him before the city is destroyed. Although he won't defend himself, his cloned henchmen will do all it takes to keep their creator safe. Have any inquiries? What kind of antagonists are we going to encounter? Midoriya is limited to villains that you all could realistically defeat as a class, so no All for One, Redestro, Overhaul, Wolfram, or 9, but other villains are free game. Is it possible for him to create several villains? No, each clone will be unique. How much time do we have to prepare? You will be given 15 minutes before the simulation begins and a map to figure out where he is. Momo took charge of organizing the routes they should take to search the city as efficiently as possible, and Jiru and Koda were especially important because they could better scout the city. With plans prepared and no one possibly going rogue again, they entered the city with 5 seconds remaining on the timer. Aizawa saw this and left the room while a timer began counting down without the class's knowledge. The strike team, which included Bakugo, Todoroki, Iida, and Kirishima, protected the group as they searched the area after the timer went off. The Nomu were a problem because they were much more resilient than the villains, and each time one was taken down, another would appear. The class knew there was a limited number of them, but they could easily exhaust themselves before they got anywhere close to Midoriya. The area was searched. We must move quickly. The class accelerated their pace to reach their prearranged checkpoints, making their way through about 5 areas before being hit underground. The building was a small external storage room in the back of a school, and when they opened the door, they found an empty room with an open staircase leading down, illuminated by lights on the side. As they descended the stairs, they saw a group of villains guarding a door. Some of the class recognized them as the villains who had taken over Island's security system, and Todoroki and Bakugo hurried in to remove them, knowing what they could do with their peculiarities. Bakugo was able to perform the same trick on the ferret-like villain as he had done before, forcing him to grab Bakugo's sweat. Bakugo hurried him, but this time Todoroki sent flames that ignited the substance, causing the villains to transform into a viscous liquid that splattered and evaporated on the walls. They walked to the door and opened it to reveal another staircase that led down. What the devil? Is this a dungeon? What is the number of floors this goes down? Jiru pierces the floor with her jacks. 3 additional stories are below. Down at the bottom is Midoriya. Numerous baddies are on the horizon. Alright, let's go in, guns blazing. As they descend the stairs, they see the Vanguard Action Squad and Tamura Shigaraki from the summer camp. Bakugo lunges forward to strike Muscular, but his blow is unsuccessful since his arm is covered in muscle strands. Oh, it's you that the doctor desired. It will be enjoyable for me to tear you to pieces. Todoroki blocked Muscular's path as he raced Bakugo, but it didn't last long because Dabi unleashed flames in his direction, dissolving the ice. I think you've forgotten the rest of us. In order to protect himself from the impact, Kirishima held his breath as he felt a pulling force that sent him flying. He hardened to protect himself from the impact, but he saw that he was flying toward Momo. He quickly deactivated his quirk on his body and tried to grab onto anything, but the room was empty. He crashed into her, taking a hitched breath as the two fell to the floor. Momo quickly created gas masks for everyone as the squad rushed forward to the class, braced for impact, and purple gas filled the room. Flesh, flesh, fresh flesh. Hearing this, Tokiyami recalled the time when the dark shadow went crazy and ran amok through the forest. He glanced up at the fluorescent lights on the ceiling and toward Kaminari, who was close by. Kaminari, take out the lights. He ripped out the lights and thrust in his finger as a black figure nodded and grabbed him up. Overpriced. When Dabi utilized blue flame to light up the room, he saw a big dark maw glaring down at him. Suddenly, the lights in the room became much brighter and burst, leaving the place in complete darkness. Shit. When Dark Shadow bit down on the clone, he started swinging wildly into the villains, killing many of them, leaving Muscular alone. Muscular rushed at the monster, reveling in the fight, and knocked Dark Shadow back, which only made it more enraged, causing it to grab onto him and tear him to pieces. Bakugo and Todoroki used their quirks to weaken it, but after a few minutes, it calmed down as Momo kept a flashlight on it. They searched the room and discovered yet another staircase down, and the class was exhausted from the poison and the fighting. So Momo tried to encourage them to keep going. I apologize, but if we give up, the remaining bad guys above will destroy the city. We must continue to move. What's the point, though? We are already exhausted after fighting 2 villain gangs. We have no idea what awaits us below. Furthermore, this is merely training. We can give it another go at another time. The students heard Minetta's comments, but Bakugo wouldn't have it. Bullshit. We must continue to fight because we are heroes. We've previously reached this point. The rest of the class returned to the surface while Bakugo, Todoroki, Iida, Kirishima, Momo, Sato, Tsuyu, Jiro, Mina, and Shoji descended the stairs. As they reached the bottom, they noticed a group of people wearing plague masks. As soon as one of the villains saw him, they merged into the ground while the others took their places. Rappa was the first to speak. Heroes, I haven't had a decent fight in a long time. Bakugo came roaring in, but a yellow barrier negated his explosions. Sato and Iida joined the fight, trying to fight Rappa, but each time they went for an opening, they were blocked by the barrier. Bakugo noticed that the barrier quirk always propagated from the same person. Rappa rushed into the class, and Kirishima stood in his way, his arms crossed to block the hit. The punch made contact, knocking Kirishima back a few steps with cracked arms. AP shot. The class started to feel unbalanced and stumbled as the villain used his quirk to block the blow, but the shot broke through and turned him into sludge. A man with crystals growing out of his body was rushing Kirishima, and a villain with clock hands for hair was getting closer as his hair extended to stab at the class. Jiro stabbed her jacks into the ground, sending a sound wave that tripped some of the villains. One of the villains grabbed her from behind and pulled her up, but she struggled and lost her strength. Shoji. After turning around, he rushed at the villain who was holding Jiro until the villain stabbed her in the throat. Not so quick, hero. I'll let her go if you tell your friends to quit. We'll stop if you let her go first, yeah right. Her neck was slightly wounded when the villain brought the knife closer. Your mauve arg. A jack was thrust into the villain's back, and as Jiro shot a pulse through it, the villain bubbled and burst. Shoji rushed to pull Jiro up, who was gasping for air on the ground. Are you alright? I'm alright. I lost all my strength because of him. I apologize, you had to witness it. Explosion as Rappa faded slowly, the two gazed at the wall in which he was stuck. At last, come on, let's grab the others. Compared to Rappa, the other villains are defeated somewhat quickly, but as they attempt to follow them, the barriers shift and divide the class. Oh my god. Bakugo raised his palm, exploded, and punched a hole in the wall before running into the maze, smashing any dead ends he encountered. Oddly, the area had to be much bigger for him to go this far. I am being spun around by that jerk. He blasts the wall around him to get his bearings in a fit of rage, and when the smoke cleared, the villain who had vanished earlier dissolved into sludge, and the wall surrounding him returned to the chamber before. The rest of the class sat on the ground, exhausted from running around the maze. Come on, just one more floor. I don't believe it's worthwhile. It only became more challenging. We've already reached our limit, but we know he can't use anything too powerful. Stop speaking that way. It's only one more battle, we must continue to move, plus ultra. Bakugo heads to the last floor's door and descends, followed by Kirishima and Todoroki. When they reached the final room, they discovered a room full of red mummies. Todoroki sent a jet of flame into the room, burning the mummies, but more came through the flames. Bakugo and Kirishima fought them off until they saw who was in charge of them all. Bakugo rushed at him, but the red bandages grabbed him and turned him into a mummy. Todoroki attempted to pull Bakugo away, but strands of hair shot at him and exploded, sending him flying. Kirishima wanted to assist, but he stumbled and planted his feet as he retaliated by punching the large chimera in the gut, but the blow was ineffective. The man grabbed his arm and lifted him face to face. Better luck next time. Bakugo suddenly blasted out of his restraints and turned the golem maker into sludge. He then looked toward Todoroki, who was avoiding Slice's projectiles, and opened his mouth to shoot a jet of flame at him. Todoroki tried to block it with ice, but that only gave him a few seconds as Slice punched through the barrier. Todoroki tried to run, but Slice stopped him. Chimera ran up behind him and chopped his neck, causing Todoroki to pass out. Upon finding Todoroki and Kirishima out of the fight, Bakugo blasted himself toward Slice, but Slice stopped him with a jet of flame. Avoid me, werewolf! Chimera reached through the haze, grabbed Bakugo's head, and pushed him to the ground, negating the effect of the explosion. Stay down. Bakugo lifted his arm in an attempt to detonate another bomb, but it simply smudged his trench coat. Just let it go, child. It's finished. Villains win. Shock replaces the anger in Bakugo. I can't lose again. No, not again. Bakugo lands outside on his back, staring at the sky, and as he quickly gets up, he notices that the rest of the class is in a similar situation to his. He looks over to the city and sees the villain pop, and he hears a rumbling as Gigantomachia emerges from under a building. The villain on top of him melts away as he is warped back to the outside of the mock city with the class. Master, your subordinates are so weak. They're not my subordinates, and this was a training exercise. They're my pals. The class was shocked to see the villain emerge from the center of the city. Was that their last task? The city's destruction was rewinded, returning it to its pre-training state as Gigantomachia slowly walked back into the mountains. Recovery Girl was tending to the class, complaining that it was unfair to force an elderly woman like her to do it. Midoriya warped to the class and started helping them treat their injuries, walking up to each one and swapping back their quirk with a super regeneration. He didn't want to use Overhaul because it causes excruciating pain, and he didn't want to use Rewind because it will return their body to its pre-training state, rendering the training useless for muscle memory. Quirk Synergy. Ignis Prometheus, Blue Flame, Heatsink, Hard Flame Fan, Half Cold Half Hot. Quirk Synergy. Ice King Thermal Manipulation, Prometheus. Quirk Synergy. Doppelganger Beast Boy, Frog, Gecko, and Chimera. Quirk Synergy. Double Item Generation, Energy Construct, Creation. As Aizawa spoke, the students gradually stood up. Get everyone together. As Mineta stated, it's only training, so if you feel like you've hit your limit and the odds are stacked against you, it's acceptable to give up. The purpose of training is to build your strength, not to break you down. I applaud the perseverance of those of you who persisted, but it could be the difference between life and death to push farther into enemy territory when you know that support is not coming. I'm not saying that's the bad choice. It might work out if the circumstances call for it. At least the learning experience was satisfactory for the class that was unhappy with their performance. Who were those bad guys, Midoriya? They appeared to be rather powerful. Were they taken from the news? I have come across these crooks. The villains close to my location were elites, while the weaker criminals and villains on the surface were part of the Nomu to help destroy the city. Wolfram's subordinates, whom some of you encountered during the I-Island event, were on the first floor. Kurogiri, the warping villain, was absent from the Vanguard Action Squad on the next floor. The group under 9 that was supposed to attack Naboo Island was on the last floor, while Shi Hasaikai's primary offensive force was on the third. Once you had me in custody, Gigantomachia was meant to halt you, but sadly, none of you made it that far. You battled them all, then. Is it true that none of them were newsworthy? That isn't how Double operates. To create a clone that retains the original individual's personality, I need precise measurements of the person I wish to replicate. So they were the closest thing we could find to the real thing? I think so. Shoji and Jiru may attest to their deceitful methods. Jiru gets a little chill when she thinks of the bad guy who snatched her. However, in order to prevent them from killing you, I must employ dominance. Given that the class was still in the upper floors, why do you think Chimera didn't simply demolish them? Hearing that, the class became a little frightened. I understand why Ua still wants you all to train to battle these bad guys. I have been keeping any situation from being too big, just like Momo felt during the license exam. You haven't had to battle unified, powerful foes who are aiming for your heads. As Midoriya ordered 13 to escort them out of the area, many in the class reflected on the USJ. They felt inadequate because of everything Midoriya had done for them, but they were also filled with a fire to face whatever challenge Ua had for them. Bakugo was hit the hardest, but he was assured that he did his best, Aizawa said. Alright, let's get to the observation room to assess your performance. Was it captured on tape? Every training session is. How do you believe we evaluate you?
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.